There we go.
Nice. All right.
By the way, what I think. Oh, hang on. Nope, keep going. I had an idea and I forgot where I was going with it.
Short-term memory loss is real.
Well, yeah, it's plus I'm like going, why is that not?
Yeah.
Yep. So how's your
Yeah.
New Year been?
It's fine, I
Yeah.
guess. It's like weirdly warm here,
In Georgia?
but also very rainy. So
Yeah.
like we can't do anything, but the kids are very sad that it's not snowing.
Mm-hmm. I can hear you on that one. Gosh dang it. I did a heroic adventure on Titan with my warlock, and it didn't give me any higher level of anything. Jerk face. Oh well. But beyond the weird weather patterns everywhere, apparently, because we're getting it here too. Things been well?
Yeah, we're just we're hanging out here.
Nice.
Um I'm in the middle of a construction project. You know how construction projects in your house. You're like, "Oh, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to do this one thing." And then like 3 weeks later, you're like renovating half your house.
And 2 walls later, after they've been torn
Right,
down.
right.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to turn the door that goes from my bedroom into my bathroom from a hinge door to like a sliding barn door.
Okay.
Like I don't want to, it doesn't need to be a pocket door. Like it can slide on the wall. It's okay. Like,
Right.
I got a kit for it. Right. No problem. Then I'm like, oh, I've got to take the trim down off the door because I don't want to have to mount the like track on like a 2x4 out on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, so then I have to take the trim down. Then I have to put drywall up to finish the door frame, so it looks like clean instead of having trim there. And then I'm like, now I have to paint this wall, only I have vaulted ceilings in my bedroom.
Oh
So now I have to
no.
buy a 10-foot ladder so that I can paint this one wall. Because I was like, oh, I'll just paint it an accent wall. I don't have to paint the whole room.
Right.
Right. And that would be fine. But it's one of the side walls that goes up to the vaulted ceiling. So I've got to find a ladder that's tall enough for me to paint it,
Oh no.
to reach up there. But I have to do all these things so that I can rearrange the
Hashtag
furniture in my
pew
room so that I can
pew
have a
choo
bed that's not on the
choo.
floor.
Jeez. So
Yeah,
what
it's
was going to be
exciting.
like an evening's activity has turned into so
Right.
much more.
Well, and then it's like I was putting the drywall up, and then I have to put the drywall mud on, and then I have to wait for it to dry. But then I can't sand it because I'm like I have to wait till my kids are at school or asleep because I don't want them
Mm-hmm.
running through and breathing all the drywall dust.
Yep.
So what should have been a 2-day project is now a 3-week project because I
Oh
can only work on it
jeez.
for 45 minutes at a time.
Oh
Yeah,
god.
it's very exciting.
That sucks. Hey chat. They can hear us, right, Blue?
Yes.
Okay. Making sure I'm not just talking
Why?
to nobody. Alright. So I got a walking treadmill as my Christmas present to myself, slash Julie's Christmas present to me. It's nice and, like, walking treadmill seems like a misnomer, but it fits partially under my desk so I can walk at a fairly slow pace while doing other things. It's
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. I love it.
One of my favorite things when I was in college was to take my textbooks down to the gym and
Mhm.
like take notes while I was walking on the treadmill.
Yeah, it's such a good idea.
We don't have a treadmill. We had an elliptical for a while, but I couldn't read on it because you
Oh,
go up
yeah,
and down and then
you're
I get
bouncing.
queasy.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I don't know. Some of the gyms have a really nice setup where you can place your book up there or your Kindle or iPad just fine. And some new treadmills have like a digital screen or you can't set anything on it. What? Why?
Yeah.
Just want something simple.
Mm.
You're already
Well,
paying shaming.
Well, so the other day when I tweeted that I was going to be on, and then Vera was like, "Oh, the pay-in episode." I was like, "No."
Pretty much. It's just like the utter go-awayness of that. Somebody, what was it the other day? Somebody sent us something with pay-in misspelled. Blue, do you remember what it was?
Oh. God.
No.
What the?
What the?
Ah.
It was in our like a DM on Twitter. Somebody sent us like a character named Payin or something like that, but it was spelled incorrectly. It took me a while to figure out what he was doing. He's like, "Are you triggered?" I'm like, "Wait, what? Why would I?" Oh, you're trying to be that guy. He was sweet afterwards, though. Not like he was actually trolling.
Why are you doing this? Okay, go there, there. Why?
What you having issues with, Blue?
The chat pop up.
Which chat pop up?
In stream.
Oh, again? You had
No,
trouble with that?
different one.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember how I did this.
I see. I see. What's up, Vero?
Ah, here it is. Okay, there we go. Okay.
So the word paean is an older word for song. Yeah. A lot of people don't know what it is. Like the only reason I knew what it was is because I went to school. That's the only reason I had any idea what it was.
I knew what it was because I'm a dork and I read the dictionary when I was in high school.
Heck yeah. My mom told me I should like practice writing the dictionary because I had terrible handwriting. Didn't work.
No. You know, when like Google was becoming a thing, my stepfather lamented the loss of encyclopedias.
Why?
Because like we had a set of encyclopedias in my house, and
right.
But his thing about it, which I understand his thought, right, which is like you pull up the encyclopedia, you flip through to find whatever it is you're looking for, but then something else catches your eye, you look at the next article or the article before it, and like you learn something that you didn't expect to learn because you didn't go there looking for it. Right. It's like people won't be able to do that anymore because you'll just type in Google and then it will answer you, and you won't have that like, oh, I learned something because I read the page next to it. It's like, but you don't seem to understand like the click on the next link in Wikipedia rabbit hole that you go down.
Soon you're learning about how to cook rabbit in a proper way, and then you learn about Charles Dickens. What is it? The type of wine, mulled wine, like the traditional way to make mulled wine, and then, yeah, I've been down this rabbit hole many times.
Oh yeah.
We had a set of those World Book encyclopedias, though. The thing that, like, you got to remember though, like, all that information was pretty much out of date by the time you got it.
Yeah, that's true. But it didn't matter so much before the internet because there was no other source of information, so everyone was behind equally, pretty much.
True.
But my mother worked for CompUSA, which does not exist anymore. And so she was always bringing home like advanced technology. And I was the first person in my grade to have the encyclopedia on CD-ROM.
Ooh.
And it would
I
read
remember
to
those.
you the articles.
Nice.
It was literally just a digitized version, and ours was like the super fancy one that read it to you in a really robotic voice.
I would go to sleep to that. Like, I would literally turn that on to fall asleep to. That sounds amazing. That's what I do with podcast well, yeah, pretty much podcast anymore. Let's see here. So, were you able to figure something out for top 3 purple, or do we need to?
Yeah, no, I figured one out. Besides Hamilton.
Yay! Awesome. Cool. Beard, were you able to figure out something for top 3? I know you were kind of stressing it.
He doesn't want to talk to you.
It's okay. I understand. Sort of. Oh, I get it, though. Lou, did you have any trouble with yours?
Nope. I actually had trouble slimming it down.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But that's how I... God damn it, where did this go? There it is.
I love how I queue in with people who still don't know how to activate heroic public events.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
It's amusing more than anything at this point. All those new Christmas time kiddos who got their destiny.
Christmas Guardians.
Mm-hmm. All right. Super efficient. Stop shooting the blight. Oh, yeah. Totally Ice Hawk. Although, I heard a rumor, and I don't know if he's in chat, I haven't seen him yet. I heard a rumor from somebody that if you shoot out the first 2 small blights, the third one you use to actually shoot out the big blight to activate the heroic, and it's a smaller amount of damage that you have to do to it. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that that's a thing. I don't know if he's in chat.
Yeah.
He might be.
Okay, check that. Does that work?
Nope, not yet.
It looks like it's working on my screen.
What are we checking?
The digital, it looks like it's working on my screen now too.
Perfect. I also apparently have a status widget that they added, which might be what broke my old version of it.
Huh. Weird. Yeah, we were just checking the stream to make sure that the chat box is actually loading up on it.
Oh yeah, it's been working for me the whole time.
Not that chat box, the other chat box.
Choo choo!
The one inside the video stream.
Yes, but when I say chat box, I mean the voice widget for Discord, not the chat box from Twitch.
Oh, like when it lights up who's talking?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
I just had to like reset the entire thing. All right, there we go.
Gotta
Hello,
love
dear.
updates.
Yeah, I think what happened is they updated their stream kit, and I guess that URL was like ancient, so whatever.
Hey, thanks, Ninja. Ninja just subbed with Twitch Prime.
From the other room.
I was about to say, does Purple know that Ninja just subbed with Twitch Prime? Dun dun
Twitch
dun.
Prime is fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna kill him.
Not till later. Not till later.
I have to do it when I'm not being recorded.
There you go.
What? It's only premeditated if she agrees. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna save that link because Jesus Christ, I need to remember where that freaking page is. Oh, so okay, what I was gonna say, I had a idea of what I'm going to do with audio as far as cues to help with editing. So since I'm kind of leaning away from playing all the canned audio, what that's going to do is it'll let me mute for you guys. It'll help mute one of the audio cords or one of the audio inputs that I have, so I can actually use that to like play like quick beeps to help kind of help bookmark things for me when I'm editing. So I'm just telling you in case it doesn't fully mute and you hear a random like beep of some kind, don't let it
Don't freak out.
Don't let it interrupt your, or try not to let it interrupt your thought. It's me trying to speed up editing and note taking a little bit. Of course, I also have to find a beep. So this is all stuff that I was thinking of like 5 minutes before. So
have you been to like the sound button website that I was using to get all the audio clips for?
Yeah, I just haven't had a chance to go grab one.
Okay, because there's a ton of them. Some of them are a lot more offensive than others, just FYI. But there's a lot to choose from. Why is Warlock floofing so easy to jump off of things with?
Yay! Grunt birthday party. Actually, no, that's not a bad idea.
Punch. Punch. Or slap. I guess I'm slapping things. Warlock is not Master Race. It's not even a race. Just FYI. It's never been a race.
It's not a race. It's not even a marathon.
Green's only doing it because she wants to kick somebody's butt on their own subclass. That's all. So I'm grinding a Warlock up and learning how to floof. Oh my goodness. Dorks.
So yeah, I'm good to go if you guys are. Is Beard with us?
He is. He's responding right now.
Oh,
in
okay.
Chat. Just the three of us, Beard? Okay. We'll do it just with the three of us that are live right now and let Beard settle a little bit.
Okay. What am I doing? Record.
Whoops.
Okay, I'm good to go.
Ditto.
So I guess my question to you, Green, is do you still want me to play your intros for top 3?
No, you don't have to. I can just get into the show host spirit for it.
Okay, because I can play those pieces because I don't bookmark anything within top 3 necessarily, as far as like discussion points. So if you want me to, I can still do that.
Nah, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
I always feel like I'm almost starting to yell over the top of the audio
sometimes
clip a little bit.
Sometimes I can. Yeah.
So, all right. Welcome to FFC Top 3, a show where we, your FFC hosts, count things down from 3 to number 1. Thank you for joining us this week. If you have a suggestion for a topic for Top 3, be sure to drop us a note in the usual places: Twitter, Discord, or even focusfirechat@gmail.com. We've actually been getting a lot of suggestions, so I'm really excited to see some of the upcoming Top 3s and see how Blue handles some of the different topics that are coming up, because some of them are a little bit geared towards him.
Rude.
What? This week, we're discussing our top 3 kind of sort of emotional or sad endings to a video game. And that one...
And it's funny because apparently I was the one that didn't have that much problems with it.
Well, I think, okay, so we have a guest host on today. One of our
Wait. You didn't tell me it had to be a video game.
It doesn't have to be a video game for you. You're fine.
Okay.
I was about to say, whoa.
Wow. Yeah, no.
Wow.
It's fine because we have
I need to get that sound clip.
Let me explain this, though. We've got a guest host on with us. She's been on here before, and it's Purple Chimera. Purple is with
Rainbow Cast.
Yes, we have a rainbow cast today with Purple, Green, and Blue. But Purple has admittedly not played as many video games as some of the rest of us, including myself. And so Purple gets
not a lot. You mean like 4?
They get a pass. They get to pick their emotional endings to whatever, whether it's a musical, a movie, something, book. They're going that direction. Yeah. Blue, on the other hand, and I, on the other hand, are going to do video game based ones. What's up, Blue? That's
fine. I don't know if you're going to give Parker.
Another shout out.
Really appreciate the email, dude. Like that was. I really like that. That was really cool. And so I'm glad that we're making your car rides fun, because that's like a huge compliment.
Parker Schilling is the one who suggested this week's topic, and he's actually suggested quite a few other ones.
Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that last one's gonna be fun.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, okay. We'll discuss it.
All right. That one I have mixed feelings about because I don't do that. But let's start with Blue. We'll go Purple second, and I'll end up third.
Okay. So
Blue, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is actually a toss-up, because one of them. So I don't. One of them's an indie game, and then the other's Gears of War 2. I don't know if any of you Green, have you played Gears of War at all?
I have played probably about 2 hours worth of it.
I'm assuming Purple has not. I think that's a safe assumption.
I watched my husband play a little bit of it one time.
Did you watch the first one or a different one?
I have no idea.
Okay, cool. That's fine. No, that's fine. The reason I ask is like Gears of War as a whole, like as a series, is very obviously very geared towards a particular demographic of game player. And that's fine. And actually, it's fine at all. It's a great series. It's actually got some really cool lore in it. And if we ever get a chance to do an extra lore on it, I'm actually really excited for it. The book series behind it is amazing. But Gears of War 2 had, like, for a game that's really very similar to like Doom-esque like gameplay, Gears of War 2 had like a huge, and it wasn't like, I guess it's not a huge twist ending, but one of the characters, Dom, actually has a very compelling storyline that throughout Gears of War 2, you actually connect to Dom at a very personal level, because he basically the entire time you play through the game, he's looking for his wife who has gone missing. And long story short, you end up finding out that she's actually not only been kidnapped, but actually assimilated into the enemy faction, and Dom is actually the one that has to end up killing her, basically. And so it's like this huge thing where it's like he's got, the standard Lancer, he's got to go up against his wife, basically. And it's like this huge, I mean, like it's for a game, again, for a game that is like not, I don't know how it's not super deep, like at a lot of parts. It actually just like completely out of left field just sledgehammers you in the feelings. So that's that one. And then completely so I feel like a little bit of a bipolar person saying these two together, but completely on a different scope, but also tied for number 3, is a game called Gone Home.
Okay.
It's like, I want to say it's like I want to say it's an indie game. I think it's an indie game. I don't know if you guys have ever.
I've never even heard of that one.
Oh my god! It's so the entire time, like it's like a Myst-esque game. Like it's a first person puzzle game, And the entire time you're basically exploring your family house. Like you come home and you basically your family is supposed to be there and they're not. And so the entire time, and it's like storming outside, and it's like the entire time it feels like it's a horror game. It's like making you think that there's going to be a thriller. It's yeah, it's like the environment is like it's setting it up to be like this, jump scare. It never goes there. Instead, it goes in a completely just like a completely different direction. And what's beautiful about it is that because you're expecting it to be a horror game, you don't really like. It's not until about halfway through the game where you start realizing that, oh, this isn't gonna be like a hack and slash game. This is gonna be like an actual like psychological like interesting story. And oh my god, the ending, if you guys haven't played it, I'm not going to ruin it because it's a really quick game to play. I think I beat it in like 1 or 2 sittings. It's a couple hours, and it is seriously one of my favorite. It's up there with Oxenfree as far as like one of my favorite games, really, because of the actual like just a little snippet of the story that you get from it. And the ending is it just crushes you. Like it, and I know that's a weird thing to be like, no, you need to go play. But it's like you get so emotionally attached to like what's going on with the, not even with your character. I mean, your character has a lot going on, but it's actually because you're seeing, you start uncovering like day-to-day stuff about the family that is not there and we don't know where they are. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, and you're playing the oldest daughter, I believe, if I remember correctly. And she's like, she starts uncovering like different secrets about her family and about this house and about this city or this town that they're in. And it's just like, it just progressively and it's nothing like it's nothing supernatural. There's no like big horror scare or anything again, but it's just all about drama within the family. And it's just, oh my gosh. Yeah, Shay in chat, the Oxenfree game. So Oxenfree is kind of similar to Gone Home, except with a supernatural bend. And it's a different play style. It's a side scroller instead of first person. But yeah, if you haven't played Oxenfree or Gone Home, I think they're both free with Game Pass, if I remember correctly, on Xbox.
Interesting.
But they're both like, oh my gosh, they are so strong as far as stories, which is pretty standard for a lot of the indie titles out there right now.
I feel like we've gotten to the point, like last week we did the whole story about the Black Armory Papers, and this week's top 3 is going to be real deep. I'm just like, I'm going to be a wreck going into the episode, just going to say that.
We're going to make you biased about it.
No. Let's not go there because I don't want Purple to come after me. Speaking of which, go before me.
Okay, so as previously mentioned, don't really have video games. So my top 3. So my first one is the play Fences by August Wilson.
Okay. I know August Wilson, but I don't know that particular play.
So it's about, like most August Wilson plays, it's about racism.
Yeah.
As you might expect. Basically, it's about a guy named Troy who played baseball, but he got imprisoned for murder accidentally, and then he gets out, and he is with his family, and then there's like a whole bunch of tension of like why he can't get a job because of racism, and then he finds out that his mistress is pregnant, and the mistress dies in childbirth, and his wife agrees to take the baby and raise it as her own, but she leaves him. So now this baby has a different mom, but not a dad anymore. And then his son like gets all resentful of all the bad decisions that his dad made and joins the Marines. And and like almost misses his dad's funeral, like refuses to go even though he got leave, and it's a whole like it's a mess.
Yeah. Gosh, the whole mother leaving with child that is technically not her own, but raises it as her own part alone is like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dang.
Yeah. So
All right.
anyway, if you haven't read it, it's really good.
Are there
But
like
yeah.
moments of brightness at all, or is it just very typical his style of writing, where it's just kind of
I
gut punch
mean,
after gut punch?
yeah, no, it's yeah, it's pretty dramatic. I mean, it takes place in 1957 in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So
Dang. You know, I kind of have a semi-similar one for my number 3, because mine is BioShock Infinite, which I don't know how many people
God.
have finished the story in BioShock Infinite, but the story is just complicated, but it ends with you figuring out that Elizabeth, who is this character you've been kind of rescuing the whole time, is your daughter, and that you had originally traded her away to Cornstalk, who is like the main bad guy in an alternative timeline when she was a baby. And so, like, you got to think BioShock in general is just kind of weird, timey-wimey stuff going on.
Yeah, but Infinite
But
actually explains why, which
it
is why
does.
it's like it creates this massive headache trying
Yeah.
to figure out like what's going on. But that's what I liked. See, I never finished playing Infinite because I couldn't. I wasn't
The
I wasn't
story
a
is
fan.
so good.
Oh yeah, no. That's what I was gonna say. I couldn't get over the mechanics, which is for me a really
Yeah.
strong point. But the story was so good that that's one of the few games that I actually went out and hunted down a like complete video of someone else playing it, and actually watched like not just cutscenes but actual gameplay too, because there's so
there's
much
a
cool
lot
stuff
of
going
stuff that
on.
you get in there.
But yeah,
But
no, like the ending explained like everything.
right,
Like,
because she has the power to manipulate time and space, and then you find out that the cornstalk from the timeline is actually you from a different timeline type thing. And then you end up having, in the end, Elizabeth drowns you in a lake to stop the continuous loop of her life and your life, destroying the entire fabric of your combined existence. So it's a suicide patricide.
heyo.
It's like, yikes. That whole game is just messed up from the beginning to end, though, because you talk about themes on racism and themes on
Oh yeah.
kind of the patriarchy and stuff like that. It's just, all over that game. But that takes us to our number 2. Blue?
My number 2 is, so just a fair warning, you're gonna probably not be surprised at my number 2 and number 1, or at least some people aren't going to be surprised. Number 2 is Halo Reach, mostly because Halo Reach, like putting aside the drama about the lore aspect of it, there was a very well done ending to that game, in which so like if you know the story of Reach, you knew how the game was going to end. Like you knew going into the game it was not going to end well. But what they did, the mechanics of portraying that in the game was just amazing, because basically it's you. So like you're part of Noble team, and throughout the game, basically, especially near the latter half, the team keeps getting whittled down, and members keep dying until finally it's just Noble 6 left, and that's your player. And then the final level is, it's like, yeah, chat's talking about it right now. The lone wolf is like, basically the objective is survive. The problem is that it's impossible. Like you are literally put on the surface of Reach as it's getting destroyed, and the entire objective is to basically allow the ship with the package, which is basically Cortana, to escape. Like it's basically you're the Spartan's last stand, and you are the last Spartan. And it's like, I mean, it's gut wrenching because it's intense as all hell. from a gameplay mechanics because it's just never ending, very difficult enemies. And then also you're having to watch like, and then when you finally do fall, the camera angle and it's one of those things where it just like hammers home exactly what was going on in that universe, and it's just really well done.
So wait a second. Is there literally no ending to that level? Like I know
No, it's an endless. It's an endless. It's basically an endless firefight, and it just keeps getting more and more difficult because basically as time goes on, more and more of the NPC allies start falling, and your difficult enemies start showing up, and then like I think I can't remember. I know. Yeah, I think like the longest that I've heard of people is like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Is like
that's
the long,
what
and that's when that's what chat's talking about right now. And it's like because after that it just gets bonkers. Like it's just absolutely insane what's going on, and you start running out of ammo. You start getting like really big bosses. It's just Oh, cuts off. Okay, it cuts off 30 minutes. Okay, so yeah, there must be a time ending then.
Okay. Just a timeout, like a never-ending gauntlet that you can never finish.
Yeah, well, and that was the intent. Was like it's like you can struggle all you want, but in order to beat the quote beat the level, you have to lose. And it's like I think there's technically an achievement. I'd have to defer to Pens on that one. If you can stay like the longer you can stay. But yeah, it's just as far as a game synergizing mechanics with like what's actually going on in the story, it's really one of the ones that I hold really high because it really does bring that weight of the situation, home.
Dang.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that's number 2 for me.
All right. So the gauntlet run at the end of Halo Reach. All right. Purple, what's your number 2?
It's the book Changes from the Dresden Files.
Oh, yay! I freaking love you. I love the Files so much. And nobody really like it's such a good series in general, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. Explain.
I almost don't want to explain it because if you haven't read them, then but it is like the 12th book.
Yeah.
So
Needless, okay, so Dresden's character has a bunch of crap that happens to him throughout the series. Like he's kind of got so much going on, and I'm trying to remember exactly what happens in Changes.
Which one's
The
Changes?
very last? Is that the very
Changes
last?
is the one that starts with Susan showing up.
Yeah.
And,
okay. Yeah. With the court, right?
With the red court.
Yeah, the red court. Because that was that after Susan had her run in, or was that before?
It was after.
It was after.
Susan met the red court for the first time in like book 1 or 2.
Right.
Early, yeah.
Yeah, it was really early.
Because it was during the mission when Dresden went into the red court and Susan was still a reporter.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that was really early. That was like book 1 or 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then Changes is book 12, and she like comes back and she's
I haven't read that far then. I think I'm on.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so we're not going to talk about it.
I think I'm on 7 or 8. Like he basically just pissed off the elf, the
Winter
fake court again. Yeah, the Winter Court again, but this time like really badly.
Pew pew. So
Susan, that just kind of
yeah, that happens continuously.
Yeah,
Susan is Dresden's love interest for those people who haven't read or know anything about it. And needless to say, at the end of Changes, the book that she's talking about, something immensely devastating has to happen.
Lots of devastating things happen, actually.
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking about the final scene, though. It's like, oh, God. Oh, man, yeah. But that is a very good book series. I consider it a candy book, though. I don't know. Like, candy books for me are books that I can just sit down and read, and I don't have to overanalyze it. So they're easy reads. Dresden Files definitely lines up with that, but it's not easy in the emotions for sure, because there are
Oh
many
no,
times that
God, man, the one of the early scenes where you get this sense of Dresden's powers when he loses his calm with the demons who killed the kids. And
Yeah.
he melts them, and all
Yeah.
the other wizards are like, and he's like, what? Say something. And I was like, oh, I really like you.
Yep. Yep. Ah, gosh, yeah, that one. I'm actually just going back. I should re-listen to all of them because I have them on audiobook because I used to listen to them when I was at the gym. But yeah, such a good series. I feel like mine's
Yeah.
really lighthearted compared to yours now, following it. Because my number 2 is Horizon Zero Dawn because of the ending where she kind of just discovers the whole thing with Gaia being technically quote unquote her mother, and that whole last couple of scenes with her just being heartbroken and dealing with that. I don't know. I have a real soft spot for kids who lose their mothers, or even if they don't lose their mothers either like reject them or something like that. It's just that's always been a real soft spot for me because I lost my grandmother really young age, and I can relate to it in fairly close terms in other ways. But yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn's my number 2. If you haven't seen the ending of it, there's the controversy about Hades leaving and going to what's his name? I can't think of his name right now. The semi sort of guide character all the way through Horizon that ends up also being kind of sort of a bad guy at the same time. I can't think of his name.
Zavala?
No, well, I mean it's the same voice actor, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Lance.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say
Reddick.
Reddick.
Yeah. But that one is not as gut wrenching as Dresden. And if you just go read Dresden Files, guys, it's Jim Butcher. Just can't say that one enough. Which brings us to our number 1s. Blue, are you going to pick another Halo one?
Yep.
Yeah, I figured.
That's
Yep.
why. I mean, that's again. I mean, it.
Yeah.
The thing with the reason why is so actually I did see this mentioned in chat, and it did bring up a good point. Legacy of Kain series. It's not so much the ending, which is why I didn't really go with it. Like the whole freaking series is like depressing because basically
Oh,
throughout
yeah.
the series you get drip fed like what's actually happening. And it's just like, oh my God, it just feels like it's so sad. No, my number 1 is actually Halo 4. Simply because if you, so like I kind of like my introduction to console gaming was Halo. Really, that's how I kind of got involved. And I don't know, like the dynamic between Chief and Cortana has always been just there in like my gaming kind of story. Like that dynamic has always been something that I held in high regard. It's a really strong story trope. They do it very well. Bungie did it very well. 343 is doing it very well. It's one of those
did it really
the
well.
books just blew it out of the water. The short stories, the story where Cortana is being tortured by the Gravemind is one of just like the most amazing. But Halo 4 is where Cortana basically sacrifices herself to save Chief. And the reason why it just is like, I mean, I remember clearly when I first saw this scene because it was it wasn't just like a gut punch. It was like someone stabbed you and then just was twisting the knife constantly because Chief always has had that very expressive voice. Like he's always had, because you never see his face until this scene. Like this is actually the first time that we see in game his face. And so like his voice has always been very expressive. You always kind of, he doesn't really have emotion, but you kind of know how he's quote unquote feeling with his voice. That's just one of his very good voice actors. And like the conversation where he realizes what is going on and you
practically has to trick him into doing
She does.
it.
She tricks him. So basically, what happens is like you're fighting the Didact above Earth, and you're on the station. You're on the ship, and in order to defeat the Didact, you have to basically blow up the ship. But in order to do that, you have to be inside the center of the ship, basically. So Chief basically dives into the ship with a bomb, and like he normally does. And in the process, he actually does manage to destroy it, but then she basically kind of uses part of her. So Cortana has been fragmenting herself to keep the Didact busy. Long story short, or it's a confusion tactic for him, a smokescreen. And then she basically she sacrifices like 90% of herself to keep the Didact busy, and then uses this like fragment of herself to basically teleport Chief off the ship while it's blowing up to save him. And like, so there's a scene where he's actually activating the bomb, and then everything goes white. And then you kind of come to, and he's inside this bubble, and Cortana actually materializes. It's the first time that Cortana is actually able to physically interact with Chief, which is a huge deal as well. It's a long time coming. She calls that out. It's amazing acting on both their parts. And then like the moment that you just like die is when Chief realizes that he can't save her. Like, it's like looking at a person reduced to a 5-year-old and then telling that person that their puppy was run over. And that doesn't even do it. That doesn't even do it justice. Cortana is a part of him, like literally and figuratively. He is not like they often had a comment in throughout the series about how he was more machine and she was more human. She was the machine that was human. He was the human that was a machine. And so now, which is why like in Halo 5, a lot of the stuff that happened building up to Halo 5, a lot of the drama was Chief's conscience is gone. Like Cortana was the thing that made him like do certain things. Like she helped guide him, helped teach him stuff. And she just was, I mean, she's not just gone, she's been ripped away. And so there's a lot of, just pain and loss. I mean, it's a huge emotional just blow. And he does so well. Like he encapsulates that emotion in like the little voice lines that he had. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, for sure. Halo, that one I actually cried at. Like, I didn't play a lot of Halo. I played ODST and then immediately went into 4 and was really confused but I read the book, so that helped.
Yeah.
But that's at the end of that one, I did cry just because of the relationship. You can tell they obviously made them really close, and how much love that Cortana shows for him in general is intense.
Yeah, and so and Pins just mentioned that too. Like the very last line of the game, if you don't unlock the legendary scene, is a scene with Chief standing on the bridge, or not at the bridge, but standing on a balcony on the Infinity, and Lasky comes up, and Lasky tries to console him, and it just doesn't, like, Chief doesn't talk, like, and he's in his armor. He's like literally and figuratively again in that armor that's kind of protecting him. And Lasky makes a comment about, protecting Earth and how he's sorry for Chief's loss and blah, blah, blah. And Chief just turns around and is like, soldier's job is to protect humanity no matter the cost. And Lasky kind of like looks at him and he's like, but we're also like, he's like, soldiers are humanity. Like, they're not two separate things. And basically one of the last lines is Chief remembering that Cortana always told him that he was more machine than human. And it's just like, it just breaks me, because it's like listening to a child, but it's in the body of, this massive warrior. And it's just.
Mm-hmm. Purple. Is it the one that you mentioned in chat that's going to be your last one?
No.
No, you didn't go that route. I was really okay. I was looking forward to that one. I was like,
if we want to talk about it, we could talk about it.
No, go for your actual number one. I'll put it on the and also ran for me.
Okay. So my number one is gonna be, I'm gonna go like full on white girl here. The Fault in Our Stars.
Oh, okay. Not expecting that one at all.
Hey, Purple,
Mostly,
I have a pumpkin spice latte and some Ugg boots for you if you need those.
Thank you. Thank you.
God.
I appreciate you.
God.
I told you.
Okay.
But mostly because it's about cancer, and cancer is a lot, like, runs rampant in my family, so it's like really emotionally attached to me.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Yeah.
So,
Chat wants to know, are you talking about the book or the movie?
well, the book.
Okay.
I didn't actually watch the movie. I didn't think I'd be able to handle that because I cried hard enough when I read the book.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the
But
one
I
that
heard that
was-
it's good.
Is that who wrote that? Is that one of the Green brothers?
John Green.
Okay.
John Green, yeah.
Green. Okay. I was like, I thought I remembered one of them had written that. Yeah.
Yes.
He writes quite a few of those like gut wrenching kind of.
Yes, most of his books are very sad. I don't think I've ever read one that really has a happy ending.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah,
they're all
not so much.
real sad.
Oh gosh. All right. So we had somebody sneak into chat here. Mr. Beard Grizzly. What are your 3, 2, and 1 for saddest endings to a game?
Oh man, I get to do all three of them in a row.
Yes.
So, my number 3 kind of comes with a small preface. It's mainly because of the time that you're with the character more than anything else. And it's also kind of like a build-up to it. You know that it's basically a necessary component for the story to continue, and you know effectively that this character, actually kind of funny enough, the number 2 I have kind of fits this bill too. But long story short, you're with this character for 3 games. You basically are literally inside of their head or their DNA, if you will. And you're really just learning more and more about them. And it would be Assassin's Creed Revelations on Ezio Auditore da Firenze. The ending to that character speaks volumes to the way that he developed the entire time, how he basically matured and changed from moment 1 to moment end. And also, of course, when all is said and done, you kind of sit back and, as it says with Revelations, you still reflect back on everything that kind of happened with you and that character. But a very important character, I think, to me within gaming in general. I am a very big... I haven't really been too interested, I guess, in a lot of the Assassin's Creed games of late, but 2, Brotherhood and Revelations will definitely always be, I think, in my memory as some of the best
God,
ones.
Ezio trilogy is just top of the line.
It's so good. I mean, the writing I feel was kind of out of the park. The overall like build up and everything, the character development,
the growth of Ezio alone, like
yeah.
Oh my God, like it was amazing.
I gotta say, seeing an assassin basically go from, well, I'm going to use this to kill people and just use it as a mask, to effectively going to a more respected position within that ranking then as well.
Mm-hmm.
That really does carry a lot of weight. That just shows that how that character has kind of grown up and changed and so on. You do actually get to experience his death then as well. They have a short movie that they created for after the fact. And it was pretty well fitting to how you would expect it all to kind of go down. And it was even respectful from the Templar side of everything. It really just came down to, like, no hard feelings. You've done a lot of stuff to, further both causes in a little bit of a way, but it's just time to kind of end it and let you rest. And that just kind of like hit me home. That was a really, really, like, it just carried on, I think, for a little for a little bit too long in my mind afterward, because how much I cared for that character. Uh anyway, my number 2 will actually be from the other side of the pond. Actually, both of them will end up being so. Uh, I feel like I'm the only one here that played a lot of Eastern titles. I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
you're right on. At least for me, I didn't even get exposed to them.
Yeah. Uh, some will be some will be somewhat familiar with this character by the end of things, because he's basically the catalyst for the entirety of this arc. This character was so prevalent and important to the overall story of this, what turned into a franchise, that effectively it turned into something that needed to be, I don't know, they needed to expand on it more because so many people had questions. Uh, Final Fantasy VII will remain one of my absolute favorite games of all time, but the one that unfortunately not many got to play was Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core.
Mm.
In Crisis Core, you play as the soldier first class Zack Fair. He doesn't start as first class, but he turns into a first class soldier. You later learn why Cloud basically is broken the way that he is. You find out why Cloud is effectively kind of lost in his own brain and lost kind of doing his own thing. And it all comes down to the fact that I'll just kind of spit off the words that always go back in my head. You are my living legacy. Uh, by the end of it, there are 3 members of Soldier's first rank class, both with Angeal, Genesis, and Sephiroth. And at the end of it, all 3 of them are gone, and then you even have Zack Fair, who also dies by the end of Crisis Core. And his story was one that ended up wanting to be kind of expanded and kind of showcased. Cloud was actually never first class soldier. He was basically carrying on all the memories and so on about basically what Zack was about and how his first class membership kind of carried on. But yeah, Zack Fair, as well as also the majority of how all that kind of handled Final Fantasy VII in general was just pretty bad. And my last, or my number 1, I guess, actually goes to a completely different direction entirely, from a couple of very dark games to all of a sudden a very cartoony one. And it'll be funny because many people would probably figure I'd say something like Nier or Final Fantasy VIII, 7, or Final Fantasy X, or something similar. And then I've got Blue over here, like Metal Gear Solid 2, and no.
Feel the
No.
sorrow.
Well, that was also MGS3,
Oh, that was
technically.
3. Oh,
Yeah.
all I know
MGS3
is all I
pretty
know
bad.
is that it was a really traumatic ending.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say, considering the catalyst and how that all kind of went. I don't know, because for me, the catalyst basically is that they have to have a fairly, like, their story has to almost end at the point that they're talking about overall. Uh, and that's where I think it ends up really hitting home with this next one a little bit. I was going to say, uh, goodness, now what was it? I was going to say Wind Waker. Wind
Mm.
Waker is probably one of the more. It's the cutesy one. It's the one where you're on the sea the entire time. But Wind Waker's overall antithesis and idea is effectively you're completely submerging Hyrule back underwater. You fail as the hero of legend, you fail to carry on that entire title, and you effectively are just submerging everything in. But then I remembered the more that I sat back and thought about it, Majora's Mask has to take a place in there somewhere as well.
I was
Majora's
not expecting.
and Twilight Princess.
Yeah, but Majora's more than anything,
Yeah,
because
that's true.
Majora's has the possible fan theory that kind of surrounds it as well.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
Because
not expecting you to go Zelda at all with this one.
well, to be fair though,
Zelda,
he's got a good point because Zelda has
Right.
a really depressing
It's-
story.
Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
really does. I just wasn't expecting it. Not that it is
Well-
a bad thing. It's just I was expecting Nier Automata to be up there, or just Nier in general.
funny enough, I really didn't cry too much or feel as much, I think, over the course of like Nier Automata. It could have been that their stories were perhaps a little bit too outlandish.
Okay.
Like Zelda is.
I think it's
This
also the
isn't to say that
dichotomy,
like
right?
Nier isn't. Yeah, I mean Zelda is one of those tales that has been with me, of course, since I was very young. I was born the same year the first one came out, so for me, it's always just been one of those games that has always stuck with me. But for Majora's Mask, if you guys aren't familiar with it, since we kind of drew this out, the idea that either Link is either dead or at least sent to a different realm or whatnot, he does effectively pop back out of the Termina Fields, but the entirety of the game is basically the different stages of grief. The fact that you're constantly turning back time and you're one of the only ones that really isn't affected by it, or you're experiencing it, but you're helping to push people through it, is one of the most touching and impactful analogies that I think I've ever seen within gaming in general.
Mhm.
But the fact that by the end of Majora's Mask, you effectively forgive and forget what had happened with the Skull Kid and whatnot, and just moved on and helped him to kind of figure things out was amazing. But it's that lead up, it's that final moment, it's that final ending point, if you will, to what might have happened to that Link, to that version of him, where he returns to Hyrule and is confused by anything that may have happened, where Ganon's forces and Hyrule's forces may have started to collide and have battles and so on, and where now there's another meaning for all of it to basically, be carried on. And all of these battles basically ensue to possibly seeing Link becoming a Knight of Hyrule. And because of this Knight of Hyrule, he basically doesn't see that version of Link. He experienced what the hero of time, adult Link in Ocarina of Time, had. I know I'm getting on timeline theory here, but he experienced what the adult Link of that time period knew what was happening. But he was sent back into the past in order to to still have a child's life and to still try to grow up, and he just never could. He could never fit back into society with that knowledge ever.
Well, that and the
And
entire reason you're time hopping is because, to kind of carry the analogy, is because of the destruction of the world.
right,
Right.
and
So like
it effectively
grief is the destruction of so basically you're trying to push yourself through this process of grief because otherwise it's going to destroy everything.
Jeez.
yeah,
oh my god, it's an amazing analysis, but it will punch you in the it'll punch you right in the feels.
anybody that thinks that like Legend of Zelda is just basically there as like a child's overall tale or something like that, once you really dig into the heart of it, you start to realize just how involved it is. I had said something on Twitter that I have like this entire like overlay in my mind right now of like an overarching theory of what's going on with the history of Zelda and like where it all even started before Skyward Sword. And it's something that I don't think I've heard anybody really even talk about. And it's all thanks to kind of like some of the stuff that we sort of know of, thanks to Majora's Mask or thanks to Skyward Sword, thanks to especially with Breath of the Wild as well. Breath, and again, it could be that I'm involved right now with Breath of the Wild. I absolutely love that game. But Zelda right now is really just heavy in my head, and I'm heavy in my head and in my heart, just in terms of like what has developed in that story over the past 33 years at this point now that it's been released. Uh,
Yeah.
but to finish my entirety here, the possibility that in Twilight Princess, the other Link basically carries on or gives that new generation of Link the skills that he had learned is basically his way of being able to live out his life as the hero that he knew that he was but wasn't all at the same time. The fact that there are then from Ocarina of Time's points in time, there are then three timelines that develop. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, I I carried that on a lot longer than I kind of expected I
No.
would, but it's either, Breath I have a
Majora's
feeling
Mask.
yeah, I have a feeling I've been told that Breath of the Wild gets, very heavy very fast, and
Towards the end, yeah.
that's what I'm kind of expecting.
I have not
Uh,
played that one, but I've watched enough gameplay to be like, okay,
yeah,
alright.
and with it being, like, one of the first, like, voice type games, that's the other thing that's making me kinda wonder.
Hmm.
But definitely between like the Fall of Hyrule in Wind Waker, and just the fact that like you're finally saying like adieu to that entire idea within that timeline, and carrying it on and moving forward, uh, just to go into another realm and have the same thing happen again, or also for Majora's Mask and just the timing that is effectively like slipped into that. Just ugh, Majora's Mask in general is just really heavy. If you guys have never like listened to theories or anything about it, it's rough. You'll be sitting there going, "This is for kids." Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll leave it there before I just keep
You're,
talking.
you're good, you're good. Um, Mine's not going to end up much better, and it's definitely not for kids. And it's one of the games we've covered on the Extra Lore series, and it's the Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. The ending of that one, Hellblade, we've talked about it so many times, and it got such a great amount of praise initially when it came out, and then everybody kind of stopped talking about it. But it's such a psychological gut punch once you figure out exactly what happens at the end, and it's hopeful but depressing and emotional, and I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's both gut wrenching at the end, but also hopeful. So I choose that one as my number one as kind of a crossover between the really sad aspect, because it is sad, and the hopeful aspect afterwards, because she's able to process things completely, or at least on her way of processing. If you haven't played that game, or if you haven't read that game, it is, or not read that game, but read anything about this game, there we go. It is very much so steeped in kind of a Norse mythology and the psychology that goes into somebody with Blue. You're going to have to help me with this since you have the degree in it. Psychosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Blue.
It's a break from reality.
Yeah.
So it's not.
And
I mean, it's a form of psychosis, but yeah, the entire underlying story in Hellblade, like as you kind of learn through the game of the actual cause of what's happening, is really, and then also I really strongly, if you haven't, I really strongly urge people to also go watch the behind the scenes explanations from Ninja Theory on why they made it the way they did and what the point, like there is legit points to what they're doing in every aspect of that game, and it's really well done, and it's also I think it's one of the few games again that I've actually watched the entire game played. I haven't played it yet. It just landed on Xbox Game Pass, by the way.
yeah,
Because I just downloaded it, so I have it. I just haven't had a chance to play it yet.
the gameplay itself is
Intense.
very It's intense, but it's actually not. It's not incredibly difficult gameplay. Once you figure out the mechanics, it's fairly straightforward, and it reminds me a lot of Assassin's Creed once it got to the point where the mechanics actually targeted correctly instead of
Once it worked.
Oh man. Assassin's Creed 1, I struggled through, but Assassin's Creed 2, once we got to the Ezio trilogy, it was fine. But Hellblade has that kind of same feel to it. That being said, let's end up this depressing, slightly sad episode of Top 3. Next week, I want to do something a little bit more uplifting. So we're going to take Mark, and I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher your last name. It is Mark Gademan. We're going to take his suggestion of doing our top 3 motivators / inspirations. So going on the opposite end of the spectrum can be any motivator or inspiration for top 3 next week. Sound good?
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one.
Is it?
Well, no, I mean,
One
like
more time,
not
what
a
was it?
not a bad, like not bad. It's just, I mean, like there's a lot. I mean, yeah, I'll just boiling it
And
down
it
to
can
just
be
3.
It could be a famous person. It could be not a famous person. Mine's not
I mean,
going to be
it's
a famous
anything, right?
person. It's,
Open.
yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
open.
yeah.
So
Okay.
I mean, narrowing it down may be a little difficult. I hope it's a little less difficult than narrowing down your top 3 endings, though. That being said, sorry for the slightly emotionally heart-wrenching episode, guys, but next week it's going to be a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter. And remember, everybody loves a list.
Yay.
And cut.
The other thing too,
Hell.
Green, is it going to be next week or is it going to be the week after?
It would probably be the week after.
Right, because you're out on the 25th.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, for Trudy's. For my sister's bridal shower.
No.
Yeah. Got to drive back to Kansas next Friday. Another 7-hour drive. But it's totally worth it. She's so funny. I don't know if I told you.
Pens on for that episode.
Is that the
That's
Halo
extra
episode?
lore. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Wait, you're doing extra lore at the did you move it up a week because of
No, that'll be the 1st of February.
No, I'm gone on the 25th, 26th. Pins is on the week after.
Yeah. That's what I said.
Okay. Oh, for the top 3, you mean? You're
Yeah.
saying that he gets to do top 3? Gotcha.
I was like,
Did you hear
wait,
that, Pens?
there's a week between? I was like, there's not a week between. I
Sorry,
was
I
really
thought you were-
confused. No, yeah,
I
next
thought you were
week is your.
Yeah. Dredgen.
Yep.
Tell you, I've been hearing a lot about that lately, especially with the new.
Are the books available?
Pins is not that bad. I have heard about data mined, but I have not seen any data mined on it. I haven't gone looking personally.
I've read both of them, so I'm hoping they are because they're really good.
They're not
They're
available
not
yet.
available in game. No.
Right. No,
They-
yeah, I know. That's why I defer to you two
Yeah.
on that.
They
I'm
won't-
going to guess that they will probably drop around the same time, which will end up being the Last
28th.
Word quest.
Yeah,
God damn it. It'll be on the 28th.
they're right after. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bah.
We'll have to see when they go. Yeah, I mean, if somebody finds one of them, then we can immediately talk about them.
Yeah, as soon as someone unlocks one in game, I'm gonna be like, all right, let's talk about it because it's really good.
Yeah, we're good.
The problem is it's the Friday before everything's supposed to drop.
Yeah, no, I know. That's what I mean. But oh god, letters is freaking amazing.
I haven't read it yet.
Oh,
I'm
it's
kind of going in.
so-
I'm going in dark. A lot of these.
No,
'cause
yeah.
it's just-
Yeah, I completely understand. Letters is it's expansion on the Renegade.
Okay.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my god. Oh my! If what I was given is actually what's gonna be in, it's gonna it's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, except I wish we could talk about them this week so we could talk about bias.
Oh God,
Yeah.
yeah. The Book of
'Cause-
Unmaking, Book of Unmaking for bias. Anybody?
No, I'm even talking about this one
Well,
too, because I'm
yeah.
sorry, but the
Letters
freaking
Yeah, black and white.
letters doesn't help anybody's theories along. In fact, I'm just gonna make a lot of people really mad when I start talking about them.
Blue, can you send me
Yeah,
copies of those
yeah.
guys? So I'm gonna forward them on to Wicked because I think he's gonna
Yeah,
he's
no,
gonna
definitely.
record those for
Well,
us.
the only thing I want to do, I do preface with them is these were my understanding, or these are data mined. So
Right.
these haven't been officially. I don't think they're officially even in the API.
They're not.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Now that I'm saying that, purple's right here. I'm pretty sure they're not, but I got them sent to. I think Anon was who got me them. I
Doesn't
don't know.
surprise me.
Well, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. And I think Baxter and Kex had, I think, both read these already. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but
I know they've been chatting about it in that group DM we've got going on.
yeah, the one that
I've
I'm
kind
not
of
in.
been, yeah, I've just been kind of turning a blind eye to it, frankly, because Anon spoils so much at this point that I'm like, dude, I want a little surprise. I'm just not going in there because of you.
Let me get these. I'll shoot a link to you real quick.
Thank you.
I just do want to preface with we don't know that these are actually what is going to be in game. So
I just want to get it to him so he can get prepped because
right.
there's
I mean, I
a
think
lot of like the voice acting aspect of it.
yeah, and Book of Unmaking is going to be a tough one if that's like the format's
Is
just going to be tough.
Is Book of Unmaking voiced by
Tebin.
Shin or it's by Teppen? Okay.
Well,
didn't
I'm
know
assuming.
who-
Hang on.
It is Tevin.
I'm pretty sure, wasn't it Tebin? Yeah, it
It
is.
is
It's from his
Tebin.
journal. It's from his journal.
I might
And it also
see
has
it.
all of the it has all the understandings of the books of the seventh book of sorrow, which is and it's an it's an explanation of what that is, which is amazing. It was so good. It's such a good read.
Is this John's stuff still?
Letters
John did it?
letters. I don't know if John wrote it, but I do know that he is still heavily involved because of a few conversations on Twitter.
Yeah, I've seen him. Like
I
he's
can ask
excited
him.
for us to go over
yeah.
your.
I was about to say, I
he's
can
been
ask him real quick.
Crap out of our stuff because of the your episode coming up.
Yeah, I love your the story of yours. Just one of my talking about biases.
Actually, can we do this possibly? And I know it. We're recording, or you guys are recording it the day, like the weekend before. But because it doesn't get released until Monday, can you hold it until Tuesday and release it with the preface of this is the information we have data mined? So it's like hot off the press. That gives you guys a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, we're gonna still talk about it on Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, if everyone in live stream's okay. I mean,
I'll put out. I just think you guys,
Beard,
if you can get on the
Beard, what is your thought about that?
I mean, we can certainly hold it. I'm game for that. I want to. I have issue even wanting to cover them because of all the topics and talks we've had about, talking about
objectivity,
spoilers, and whatnot. And
that's why I was curious if you had.
But that's the reason why I say hold it until Tuesday.
Well, but what I think Beard's also getting at is because we don't know that these are legitly going to be the ones that are released, and there have been instances in the past where people released content and it wasn't what was actually released.
That's why I would say put it with a grain of salt at the beginning, or like the the clarification at the beginning of, hey, this is what has been data mined. Maybe not make it as a big part of the episode, but discuss it at least in a little bit on what you think is coming or like what is possibly going to release because of the data mined information. I don't know. I know it's like iffy because of the timing.
Yeah,
I also,
Yeah, and see,
if
I'm
we're
thinking
talking about discussing them this week too, which I don't know if that's the case. I really don't want to do that.
okay.
I mean, maybe we could. Green, when do you get back?
Probably not till Sunday.
I mean, we could always record something. If we could figure out something on like Tuesday or Wednesday and record it.
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
Or if we could do
Wicked has a really good point too, and this is where I kind of hesitate, is because from a point of view of a fresh viewer who doesn't follow us and who just stumbles on the show, you know, if they open up the thing and we're discussing that, there's that first impression type thing.
right.
That I do.
I get
I
that.
do agree that.
I just want to be able to make sure that we get on the front end of this. Because
Oh yeah, no. I think if we want to, we could probably do something quick and dirty on Twitter, or not Twitter, on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Sure. Where we just
Especially,
discuss it
I mean,
informally.
especially if this is what actually gets dropped, then I've already read it. I don't know. I mean, I just sent you it.
Right.
So like if it's pretty similar to what I have seen, then we're even more prepped for it.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
just
I'm
my
down
thoughts.
with that. Even if it's like a game stream where we just
Right,
record it and
right.
upload it as an
Beard, would you be
supplemental
more
or
comfortable
something.
with that?
Yeah, that would be fine. Just so we can.
Just so
we'll
you have
verify.
confirmation
log
that
on
it's actually in
Ishtar
there.
as well. Yeah, because we'll have the change log on Ishtar as well in case something does get altered. Because with it being in the API, we can at least go back and look at it for what we already read.
Right.
So that'll be
True.
beneficial.
Right.
Can we at least announce it during the episode so when the episode drops Monday that people know
Oh
that
yeah,
we're going
yeah,
to
yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
Because
That's all
I
that
get
I'm
what
wanting
you're.
to
I
do.
completely get what you're saying too. I mean, I see it. I legitimately do see that particular argument on both sides because of the schedule and stuff like that. I totally.
I mean,
Okay.
when all is said and done, they've honestly been very good with not changing a lot of stuff at this point.
The
I
thing you
haven't
put in
seen
chat the other day was so funny.
what's
Oh,
that?
the conversation between Seth and Z.
And the
Oh,
card that was
yeah.
quote
Yeah,
unquote data mined from
that's
that.
Right.
yeah, the one where either like, so let me get this straight. the bait that we put out wasn't taken, but everything else
Yeah.
was.
But everything else was. Yeah,
Okay.
that was
So-
the irony of that whole thing.
I'm going to go refill my coffee real quick before
Okay.
we start the next one.
Last Word Quest is what is that, Tuesday?
20,
Is it 28th or 29th? I
think.
can't.
28th.
Okay.
29th.
29th?
They
Okay.
were correct in chat.
Okay. Yeah, 29th would be Tuesday, yeah. What was I doing? No. Just go there.
I could have swore they had said the 28th, but
I thought they said the 28th. More sense if it be the 29th?
It would almost have to technically be the 29th unless there's like a precursor on the 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm ready. I have a dog poking its nose in through the door. Excuse you. Go away. Let's see. Yeah, Uni is super good about getting all that.
What's up?
Oh, Shay's saying that he's going to get all his information from Uni.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so since we're skipping the introduction and the summary and going directly into community question, which
Well, so what I'll do is we'll run through like the basic intro where it's like, episode number, introduction of the people on air, then we'll do the community question, and then give me like a 5-second pause, and then we'll jump right into Lost Lore.
okay, there's actually a lot of really good community questions that could be a launching off point too if we needed it.
Okay.
'Cause
So do you
there's a
want me to
couple of
ask what are we going to have another one ready for next week or
I can put one out for next. Yeah, you
or
want
did
me to
you?
come up with a question real quick?
Oh no. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Or
Did you have? You mean there's a lot of responses for this week's question?
correct. People have their own biases that we can talk about,
okay.
and some of them that are more applicable than others.
Brunch. Okay.
I love brunch.
I just looked over at chat and they're like brunch. I'm like I don't know what's going on.
Did you guys see the amazing brunch that Julie made for us yesterday?
Did you post it somewhere?
I did on Twitter. It was smoked salmon with a poached egg on top with hollandaise sauce on top of that, and then like fresh cut strawberries. Oh my gosh. Even Bife drooled on it. He's just like, oh my god, so jealous. Yes. It was delicious. Smoked salmon and eggs Benedict, essentially. So good.
Oh god, someone just posted a video of a pigeon dancing to blurred lines.
Oh. Why?
Because the pigeon's actually dancing with the street performer. It's really funny. I'll copy it.
Easily distracted. That is what we are. Oh no.
Like if you watch the pigeon, he's like bump 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 bump.
Good lord.
How did the Pentathon conclude?
Pentathon?
Yeah, Bungie.
Huh? I don't know what you're talking about.
Their annual in-house competition.
Oh, I have not been paying attention to it, so I don't know.
Oh god. All right. I'm gonna get off that. There we go. Okay. All right. You guys good to go?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Purple. Sorry.
Pentathlon? Pentathlon?
Middle school.
Old school. Was
Yeah,
this like
it's
a kid thing or
No. It's a competition that Bungie runs in-house. And they group. I think it's off tenure. I want to say it's off tenure. So like all the newbies group up, and then all the veterans group up, and then there's like a group in the middle called middle school.
Okay.
And it's just like a running. I think it's a whole day. I want to say. I can't remember if it's a whole day or if it's a whole week. I can't remember. But it's like basically all sorts of competitions that they're all competing against each other with, and it gets kind of competitive. So
Sounds like it. I do not know how to use the super.
but you got out of the
Just-
hole.
I got out of the hole.
Help! I'm
now
stuck in
using,
a hole.
I'm used. Yeah, I typed that in chat. Stupid warlock jump. When you get stuck in the lost sector, in the very first frickin' lost sector in EDZ, because you can't jump out of the frickin' hole in the church. Jesus. This is why I hunter. Jumps make sense there.
Oh man! All right. So Purple, you're back. We good to go?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Cool.
My husband bought our 5-year-old a Pikachu onesie. So it's like bright yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up and there's just like a Pikachu standing in the corner of the living room. And I was like, oh.
You! I thought I caught you. Go back to bed. Oh man.
Oh man.
All right. So as we mentioned before, chat, we're gonna skip some of the we're gonna skip the canned audios. So we're just gonna pause a couple seconds in between. If you guys do hear a glimmer of audio in the background, don't worry about it. It's me kind of using one of those channels that I was using for that audio, those canned audio files. That's me using that for bookmarking different things during editing purposes. So don't. And that goes both for chat and for you guys as well. Live chat or stream, voice
Host.
chat. God, what the word am I using? Voice chat.
Co-host.
Yes, that word. Thank you. So just a heads up, if you do hear a glimmer of something, don't worry about it. Just keep going. Just ignore it. So, all right. So welcome back to episode 155 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on January 18th over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look at biases. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those on the show for tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. Next up, we have our own master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I hope you're doing all right. How has the week treated you so far?
It's been rather relaxing and productive. I actually took the plunge today and decided I was going to go play Call. And believe it or not, I went 10-0 on the first part of the Luna's quest, the Luna's Howl quest, because of the new matchmaking style. I know if I would have tried this like a month and a half ago, it would have been a totally different story. But I don't feel like the matchmaking is terrible now. Like, I actually feel like I'm learning as I'm going up in rank, rather than just getting stomped as soon as I get into matchmaking. But yeah, that's what I got going.
Yeah, so I've seen that kind of bumping around on Twitter. It's a pretty contentious topic right now. But I think changes in general are always contentious, right? Which is what we'll kind of be talking about tonight, actually.
Right. And the biggest complaint that used to be what was being had is that a lot of people who were at level, like the very beginning levels, at Guardian level, were getting matched up with people who were doing Legend or Legendary and like doing Mythic and stuff like that. So they were so much further ahead that they kept getting just steamrolled every single game. So I'm impressed with the changes. I enjoy the changes. I actually can contribute to my team. So that is always helpful to me.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, rounding out the usual team, we have our good buddy, the lore content cop himself, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing?
All right. It's I think I will leave it at it has been a week, and yeah, Purple, take it away.
So finally, once again in the hot seat as guest co-host, we have our good friend from the Ishtar Academy over at the Ishtar Collective, Purple Chimera. Purple, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I'm really struggling this week because reloading is a thing. I was using Crimson for a really long time,
Oh, God.
and then I got this Duke, and I was like, why am I always running out of bullets? And then
Oh,
like
no.
reloading is a thing.
You need
that
to
you're
find a
supposed to
trust.
do.
Find a trust. It's a little faster. Gosh, do you have at least like a faster reload? Because Duke tends
I
to
mean,
be
it
such
is,
a
Hashtag.
slow.
it is. I mean, it has Outlaw and Rampage.
Okay. That's not
Okay,
too
but
bad.
like, I still have to press the reload button, which I didn't have to do before.
I still have to
So-
remember to push the thing.
Yes,
Okay. I hear you on that.
that's my struggle this week.
There's nothing worse than getting into an encounter and like being like, "Oh, I got the drop on them," and then realizing you have no ammo and you're just pulling an empty
Mhm.
trigger at them.
See, I always was the person that I couldn't. That's the reason I always had trouble with Borderlands guns, because the Borderlands guns were always the ones that you couldn't like reload. You had to throw them. And I'm a compulsive.
Not all of them.
The ones that are really fun to play with, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I'm a compulsive reloader. So like I'll shoot like twice. I'm like, up, gotta reload. Like nope. It's not, my OCD is not okay if it's like not that full clip, and I'm just like running around. I can't.
So
I can't
drop mag is not a good thing for you.
No, it is not a good thing. I'm like, I see that perk or I see that thing. I'm like, nap. Get it out. I'm never gonna see a benefit from that particular investment.
Oh gosh. It's so much faster. Anyway.
I don't know where I was gonna go with that. Anyway, so for this episode, I don't know. My brain just turned off. For this episode, Green was kind enough to ask the community about. She was brave enough to ask this community about their biases, and I believe there was a pretty vocal response.
You know, it was vocal, and lo and behold, the very first response was my bias is that Titans are the greatest. Because that was 12 seconds after I posted it. I was like, of course a Titan's going to put that as soon as I post it. But we had some good responses besides the whole typical class bias that people tend to have. And granted, we're not talking about class bias in this episode necessarily. We're talking about bias of perspective and whatnot. But a lot of people were, how's the best way to put this? Some people have a bias in the way that they're approaching the game now because of how often they feel that the community or the developer has quote unquote let them down. So they're approaching the game with a bias in that respect, that they're being either extra judgy or feel that they get triggered at the littlest things now. Gosh, what else was there? Bias. Oh, this one I've seen a few different times. The grayest of foxes, Gray Fox Forlorn, said that I'm biased towards Dredgen and the Guardians following the
I like
Drifter
that
because of a
answer.
gun or title.
I liked
I've barely
his
played
answer.
Gambit for lore and Gambit and gameplay reasons, but I am biased and I won't support a shady character's plans. I've even deleted the quest for malfeasance. Don't want it. Nope. And I've had this conversation with a few different people because I proudly wear the badge of Dredgen, and I'm really excited to see if they make that consequential moving forward. Like those of us who wear Dredgen and continue with Dredgen versus those of us who are not.
A Drifter's Gambit.
Mm-hmm.
Final letter from a Drifter's Gambit is I'm hoping that
I
they
know.
do follow through with that, because that's going to be really interesting.
I'm
But-
excited. I'm excited to get my butt handed to me, frankly, because that's what I want to see happen.
I mean, it's all made up anyway, so I mean,
real quick, Green,
I'm just gonna kill that real fast. I guess.
Okay.
Listen,
I
Beard,
mean-
just because we live under a Dyson ball and it was a great idea, your response
No, it
to
wasn't.
Z's tweet was the best. And
Oh,
then
no.
there's
this.
Stealing the meme.
Oh my god!
I mean, everybody seemed to have stolen and
Oh,
loved that meme, so
it was
I'm totally fine with
amazing.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Go for it.
just to expand on my small thing, like we're gonna talk about bias tonight. Y'all might hate me when all is said and done.
Well, and I think that actually segues into what I was going to toss in before Green kind of dives into the answers that she got. Real quick, just an overall definition of what a bias is, because I think that can get kind of it's like I'm going to get in so much trouble. It's like retcon. It's misused a lot, and it's used somewhat incorrectly a lot of times to defend stuff that's not necessarily. So a bias is often synonymous with like a prejudice or a opinion or an influence or something like that. And actually the definition is it's a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or a group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. However, it also means to cause or feel or show inclination or prejudice for or against someone or something. So it's not necessarily always a negative thing, just similar. And this feels like a lot like our conversation about retcons, right? There are shades of what this word can mean. Usually when people use the term, it is in regards to like that disproportionate and unfair favor that you kind of feel either for or towards something, or an inclination of like how you feel. But the other thing too to remember about biases is that a lot of biases are learned. Like these aren't, I mean, there are, so arguably there are some biases that are no, there's not. Biases are all learned. It's just in either it's a conscious learning or an unconscious learning. Like your experiences throughout your life will definitely flavor your worldview, your what's called a paradigm. And that paradigm is the important thing with biases to remember is that biases are not necessarily facts. They are not truth. Now they can coincide with it. Like there are some biases that tend to coincide with facts, but they are in and of themselves beliefs. And so you have to be very careful when you're expressing a bias or expressing opinion, because that's exactly what it is, right? It's an opinion. It's your perspective on a situation. And to kind of harp on that a little bit more, no one knows the full context of a situation if it's not their situation, right? I can tell you that, Beard, to kind of pick up on something, Beard is being quiet this evening. So there might be something going on with Beard, but I don't know what is going on with Beard. If I meet a friend and they look like they've been crying, I understand that. I pick up on that. But the cause of that crying, it could be, people cry for a lot of different reasons, and I don't know that context. So you have to be careful of the assumptions that you take going into a situation, which is what colors what's, again, called a paradigm. And a paradigm is basically, and the image of the banner, I see people were chatting about that in chat, or in the text chat of the live stream. The image of the banner was actually kind of a nod to that. It's the concept of what's usually called a rose tinted glasses, right? And that's a throwback to Wizard of Oz, which I'm not going to go down that particular rabbit hole because it's a really interesting story. But anyways, the thing to remember about opinions or cognitive biases or your paradigm, whatever you want to call it, prejudice, however you want to call it, is that it colors the way you see things. But it doesn't necessarily change what you're seeing. Or it doesn't, let me rephrase. It colors and can augment how you perceive something, but the thing that you are perceiving is not going to be necessarily affected by how you see it. How you react to how you see it can't affect that. But the event that you are perceiving is still happening, and there is context outside of your awareness that you have to be aware, like that you have to understand that you do not know everything, right? In order to look at something, you have to stand at a point to look at. And in standing at that point, you are going to miss some of the context. The easiest way to explain this is if I am standing at a corner and I see a car wreck, I can see one side of the car wreck, but I by my own existence, I cannot bilocate and see all angles of that particular car wreck. And that's where the kind of the beauty, that kind of segues back into really what we try to do here with Focus Fire. You know, we try to bring in, the more people you bring into a situation, yeah, it can get messy and it can get loud and confusing, but also the more perspectives you get. And the more perspectives ultimately get a better picture, right, of what's going on. So I think that's just that would be my kind of introductory rant to biases. I don't know, Purple, did I miss anything or misspeak?
Well, no, I don't think you misspoke. I think the only thing that I bring up a lot when I talk about bias is that you're not going to be able to get rid of your bias in any situation completely because of all the things that you just talked about. But I think the more important thing, rather than remove, because people try to remove, they're like, oh, let's take away all the biases and we'll just write truth, but that's not how life works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more important, I think, to be aware of your biases and acknowledge them. I've talked about this before when I've talked about bias in the past, where like when we write a history paper, right, a well-written history paper will acknowledge the biases of the author at the very beginning. So you know going in what their biases are, and then that helps you find a more neutral position when you're reading their papers. It's when you try to hide your biases that you get into lots of trouble.
People said that more often.
Yeah,
well, okay, but I mean, to be fair, that is very common in a lot of like strong academic works. Is usually you have it in the preface that of especially the dissertations and stuff that I've read, at least, because most of those, to be fair, are psychological, so that it's kind of hard to quantify things that is not by nature quantifiable. So a lot of times there's a preface in which that is actually discussed, and you know, I think that's spot on. To be fair, is like if you ever got to a point where you didn't have a bias, you wouldn't be perceiving anything.
Yeah,
you're not a person.
So I mean, but that's why. Oh, go for it, Beard.
It's just. Sorry, Green. Go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry.
It's very rare as well to have people that'll think on both sides of the story, like it, especially even to. As I see people nowadays as well in arguments and whatnot, it comes down to looking into the other side of the story to end up getting a more fuller picture of what's going on. That doesn't mean you're going to lose your biases or lose your overall view, but to get that secondary viewpoint can really also help with constructing your own vision and even altering how your vision is. And so often I feel like people are they're unwilling to change that opinion, I guess. They're unwilling to alter how they might have viewed something beforehand, even if it does amplify or exemplify what they were thinking beforehand, or even just like more often than not clarify what it is that they're after. Like these are words that I've brought up, I think, several times over the last several months. And they are towards, in some cases, specific people, and in other cases they are towards a majority. When I start talking about clarification versus a retcon, when I start talking about looking into bias versus a headcanon or something otherwise, like all of these things have important merit and why we continue to drive them home. Because there are so many viewpoints that need to be acknowledged as headcanon before they are acknowledged as being in any way, shape, or form total or utter fact. They are theory. The idea of perceived theory, the idea of perceived fact and whatnot, is something that continues to grow within a society as a whole. I look back on something, for instance, that I brought up to somebody before. The theory of relativity is a theory. It's a very practiced theory, but it's still called a theory for a reason, even if it happens to be about 500 years old. I look back over it like the theory of gravity. The same holds true there. particle physics and molecular structure, how space and exiting, etc., can end up working and moving. All of that is theoretical. And even if we start talking about some points in history, I bring up Sun Tzu as often as I do. There are still points within there that we don't necessarily know about. I bring up the idea too of how a strategist didn't exist previously, and then all of a sudden Sun Tzu pops up, and there's a strategist. These are things that are very important when we kind of discuss this idea, basically, when we talk about bias. Anyway, I'm carrying this on a little bit too long.
No,
Don't mind me.
No, you're not really, because if you think about trying to remove bias, the scientific perspective is probably one of the easier ways that I can assimilate it, in the fact that you don't remove bias. You acknowledge that it is there, and you can make an informed decision based off of all the information around you, not just assuming that one is correct over the other.
Yeah, that's kind of the
Right.
foundation of the scientific method, is to
Yeah,
it's not to neutralize, it's to in as so far as much as possible, it is to identify and take into account for it, right? Because that's why one of the golden rules of scientific exploration is repeatability. Like if you can't repeat if you can't repeat it, then it's not it was a fluke, right? The other thing,
I'm gonna say that comes down to like Sigma standards and whatnot as well.
Which
I'm still sitting and dealing with as well. And like the whole idea of having a thing similar to scientific method is to also make sure that people go into something with some type of general accepted doctrine towards approaching a theory. Anyway, just to add on to that a little bit.
The other thing, real quick, Beard, is the other thing that came to mind. I know everyone knows I love my quotes. It's an old Aristotle quote, but it's a pretty good one, I think, in regards to what you were talking about just a few minutes ago. It goes, "It is the mark of the educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." And I think that kind of sums up really nicely what you were talking about, right? Is the idea of, I can entertain what you're saying, but that but entertaining what you're saying and entertaining an opposing view doesn't mean that I agree with it. I do this a lot. I mean, I think, and I think everyone does this quite a bit, more than you realize, right? If you're ever in an argument and if you find yourself being like, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from. I don't agree with you, but I see, like, I can at least understand where you're coming from. To form a logical argument, you have to have a degree of that, because that's how you counter argue. Like, I mean, you can't have a counter argument without being able to, at least to some degree. I mean, I guess you could if you just want to insult people, but that's not very effective. Like, in order to actually win an argument, not by badgering, but by actual, like, winning the argument or winning the debate, you have to understand where the opposing side is coming from. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind too, especially kind of going into biases, because kind of to pull this back into the concept of bias, we've kind of mentioned cognitive biases, and cognitive biases, Chad actually was talking about what's one that's called the rosy retrospection. It's the good old days, air quotes, on, like, Destiny 1 was so much better. No, not necessarily. Like, there might be some cases, this transitions into the conversation of, like, well, what do you mean by better? Because mechanically, there might be things that, yeah, they might have done quote unquote better. I mean, but everything is opinionated, right? It's all in the eye of the beholder, if you will. And so when you say the good old days, that's often a form of what's called rosy retrospection, which is a psychological bias or phenomenon of people basically judging the prior events as better. Nostalgia is another kind of phenomenon that ties into this very closely, and that it's just not true. Like it's a lot of people are like, these are just, this is just a bad time to be alive. And it's like, no, actually, it's actually really good. If you look at all the historical, like mechanical facts of what is going on in the world today, we actually have a pretty good life. Like we have, I don't know, modern medicine. That's a pretty cool thing.
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, thank God.
Penicillin is kind of useful, guys. Just a heads up there. Whether or not you're allergic to it, that's a whole different conversation. But like the fact that we have modern medicine,
There's ways to work around that.
Right. The fact that the vast majority of humanity is able to live past the age of, I don't know, 6 months is a pretty big deal. Like that's, I mean, just that's just in the last couple 100 years that has changed. So like there's it's called rosy retrospection is a particular psychological phenomenon. And that's just one. I mean, I think there's over 180 recognized cognitive biases currently. And I mean, that's just the ones that have been documented, and those are unique. Like those are separate, unique biases. And a lot of times when you're in a conversation with someone who is like feeling a bias or is expressing a bias, there's a lot of times where those are actually blends of different types of biases. Not any one person is going to have this, like, there is no one that has the same point of view as another person. That's both the beauty and the annoying thing about humanity, is everyone has their own point of view and their own will of how to react to that point of view. And we see that in, kind of going back into the concept of perception, which is what Purple was kind of mentioning earlier, is like, there's no way to neutralize that. Actually, that's something that you want. You want to have differences in perception, because by having differences in perceptions, you get different facets and you get different points of view. And those different ranges will basically, hopefully, eventually culminate in a better picture of reality that you are experiencing, that you are living in, right? And that's both a philosophical and a realistic argument, as from a scientific empirical standpoint as well. The more paradigms that you can synergize, the better overall picture of what you're getting will become. The more that you will neutralize the rose tint of the glasses through which we look at reality, is hopefully that's ultimately the end goal of not just recognizing biases, but that's the end goal of recognizing those biases, is so that we can take it into account.
So let's talk about some of the biases in Destiny.
Yeah, I think that Purple, I know you had, I know we had mentioned last episode the difference between dynamic and static storytelling. Do you want to kind of explain what that kind of means, as far as like, this was back, I think it was in March of last year. So it's around episode 123, I believe. I don't remember how much we got into the dynamic versus static presentation of storytelling and lore, but I know we had mentioned it. Do you want to kind of explain what that means and the differences?
Sure. So basically, like a static story is like a narrated story arc, right? Obviously, even narrated books can get quite complicated, but at some point they are contained in a box, whereas dynamic storytelling is like more sandboxy, right? Where you create an entire world and people are interacting and things are much more complicated, and you have different perspectives. So that's like real life, more like real life is, because as we mentioned previously, there's not ever one answer for anything in real life. And that's kind of the direction that we're going with Destiny lore, as they expand and complicate the storyline, it gets more complicated, and there's less black and white, good and bad kind of characters.
So it's more real than fiction.
Right. It's more realistic. Insofar as the connections between people and the narrations of the story.
Because I remember, I can't remember if it was with us or during one of the podcasts with Baxter and Kex that you had made a comment about that was actually the fun part about video game, analysis. Is that it's inherently, you inherently have a box of rules that everyone knows, right? And those rules can change, but if they change, everyone knows them. Whereas with like reality, it's like, what is going on? We have no idea historically what this person's life was,
Right. Like in real life, I can find a box in the attic of letters and I can spend my whole life tracking down who these people are and never learn anything about them. Right.
It sounds like you're talking from experience there.
Yeah. And if they're dead, then you can't ask them any questions. Right.
That's
it's
as
really
morbid of a comment as that is. That is also fascinatingly accurate, because it goes back into, honestly, you could say that about someone who's alive too, right?
Right. Sometimes people don't want to answer your questions.
Right. In Destiny, we have characters who are alive and well, and they are just as, if not more, mysterious than some of the ones that we don't have alive and well.
Zer,
right.
Well, so Zer, Mara, there's a number of, Shin, it's going to be a big one here in a couple weeks. There's a number of ones that are out there that are just as mysterious, if not more so, than some of the quote unquote gone ones.
Yeah, well, and the point that I was making with the video game comment was that I know, because this is a curated set of information that I have been given by a group of storytellers, right? Mm-hmm. So there might be something that's a red herring, right? But everything they've put in for a reason.
On purpose.
Right? So, like, if there's something that causes us to go down a rabbit hole, like take the Resolazir thing, right? We didn't have all the information at the beginning, right?
We still don't have all the information, technically.
Well, yes, sure. But, we as a community drew a series of varied conclusions based on the information that we had. Then Bungie said, okay, here is the next set of information. Now you have new information that you can add to. I'm like, oh, now we have more information. Let's change, what we know. That doesn't always happen in real life. And sometimes something that you, as the researcher, think is important, the person who created the document didn't think was important. And so they make one comment about it and then they never say anything ever again. And then you don't know if it was ever important or not.
Stupid hunter outfit. Hunter.
Well,
what was it? Class items?
It was class items, yeah.
Yeah.
To just clarify real quick, though, I want to go back real quick, because I would argue that, so the way, this feels like splitting hairs, but the way that the information, yeah, it probably is. The way that the information was revealed about the Resolazir / Yor event, that does mirror reality. However, I think what you were saying is that Bungie knew the end before we even got the beginning, and that's what doesn't mirror reality, right? It's a narrated, yes. It's a controlled drip of
specifically
information. Engineered.
Right.
I think would be the word, right, Green, that you're going for? It's like specifically engineered process and a controlled. Whereas it might be it was because like I remember when we were talking to John about like actually about that the way the example that I keep going back to is the exploration of the Great Pyramid or the pyramids, right? You would have everything that you've excavated, and you're like, all right, this is 100% how these people lived, and then someone trips and falls through a wall, and everything just gets thrown out because now you have new context. And you have to have that fluidity. But the difference between, reality and destiny here is that there's an illusion of that dynamic. Blah, blah, blah. Let me back up and try to talk.
Dynamic?
Yes, that word, which I don't know why that word gave me a twist. There's the illusion of the story being dynamic, but in reality, it really is actually pretty static. In the definition,
from the perspective. It's static in the perception of the actual writers.
Correct.
For us, it appears dynamic.
Right. And even to a degree, that's where the mature conversation of retcons, not the let's throw it against the wall and hope it sticks conversation, but like the actual use of the narrative tool of retconning, that is where that comes in, because there are events that even within a static story need to be treated dynamically. Does that phrase make sense to anyone else, or was that just in my head?
I mean, it made sense to me.
Okay. I was like, I said it, and I'm like, that was possibly really good. So like, even in a book, even in a work of fiction, there are events that you have to go back and clarify and possibly tweak, and that is where the tool of retcon actually comes into play. And that's not always a negative thing, because that's often what helps build the illusion of a dynamic world, right? Is, oh, hey, this is a bit of information that you didn't have yet, and here's what's going to be used to clarify. I mean, the Rezyl Azir arc is a amazingly great example of that entire illusion / reality of what was going on between us as consumers and Bungie as the creators of what is being consumed.
Yeah, and I think like the thing that I love the most about it is like having the ability to go through all the lore that we have and all of the flavor text that we have, and knowing that someone put it there for a reason. So any one of these things could be important and could show up later.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Some of the things that what Beard was finding at the beginning of D2 that we were like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this here? And he finds like that one line back from that one card, from that one item.
Yeah. So it's the difference between like going through a curated box of a curated puzzle versus like,
I like that,
going through someone's house and like some of that stuff is important and some of that stuff is not important and you don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I like that example actually, because it's like we've been given a box of a 5,000 piece puzzle. You can give a different person the same size box of handwritten letters, and it's going to be completely, different, because the puzzle has an end. The puzzle has a purpose. It has a telos, or whatever you want to refer to it as. There is a point at which the puzzle is complete and you see the full picture for what it is. Whereas with the box of handwritten letters, it's like, well, I don't know. These could be, we don't know. Like, we have no idea where it ends, where it begins. Like, what is the purpose of some of these? I think that's this different. That's really I think that's a great way of looking at the difference between a dynamic and a true static story. The static would be the puzzle, and the dynamic would be the box of letters.
Yeah.
So do we want to dive into the one that I know Purple's kind of chomping at the bit to get to with the Drifter lore?
You mean a Drifter's Gambit?
Oh, man. So, okay. Drifter.
Or
Followed
is that
by
actually the one that,
Defiance.
or is that the one, or is that
Oh, yeah.
okay.
That's the one that I've noticed her talking about. Don't let me step on your toes or anything, Purple, but that's the one you've mentioned to me multiple times.
I mean, yeah. So, what started off on this whole thing was I was trying to write a summary, like it's my job to do, to write these nice summaries. And I was like, oh, I'm having a good time writing summaries about books, right? Instead of having to click through 4,000 item descriptions
Mm-hmm.
for the other categories. I was like, I'll just keep writing summaries about books. And then I got to Drifter's Gambit, and I was like, we're in a fight now. Because here's the thing. All of these entries are very clearly that the renegade is writing. They're very clearly biased against the drifter, right? The renegade, he does not like the drifter. He, she, they, I don't know.
Until
It's
the end.
mystery.
Until the very
Well,
end.
I would
There's some
argue he
sort of.
still doesn't really like him.
No,
I
he
mean,
doesn't. He doesn't, but utilizes. I
Yeah,
don't know.
he sees a use for him. Or
There you
they
go.
see a use for him, I guess, to be fair to Purple's comment there.
Mm.
yeah. So, but we know so little about the drifter from any other perspective. I mean, this is really the biggest chunk of information we have about him. And I just don't feel comfortable writing any kind of summary aside from like, here is a series of entries about how a renegade feels about the drifter.
Yeah.
And so like it's here we go, like we need another perspective in order to make some kind of generalizing statement about the drifter.
So
I don't know if that will make sense if anyone hasn't read it, but
I mean,
I
I have
just
it.
thought we
You
could
know,
just call him a cannibal and move on, but that might be me.
Beard just gave the tactful answer that I was going to give because I have a summarizing statement about him, but I'm not going to say it on this show.
I mean, to be fair as well, even when we get something from Drifter, it still seems like it's mired in a lot of like really reclusive fog. Even when we get stories that are told of him doing things out on patches of land, it still feels like it's mired in this like unnatural idea of him just being a storyteller, which that's really grabs at like what being a hunter is almost all about, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
They rely on tales and they rely on hearsay, so why not push that to the nth degree? That's all that it really feels like to me whenever I read almost anything about the Drifter per this point, which gets into a completely different topic of discussion that I will not go down just yet, but just saying, I don't know, I don't see a lot of I don't see a lot of stuff that's going on with him that I've been able to believe to this point yet. Even when it's like sitting in front of my face, I'm just like, this guy is the constant thing that we get even from like kind old Eva is he's not to be trusted. Uh, that's the biggest thing overall that I continue to sit back and go, sure, okay. Anyway.
I mean, I'm not saying he should be trusted.
Well, I'm not
I'm
saying
just
that you think
saying.
that either. I'm just saying that we're constant from like anybody that's like outside looking in, especially like somebody like Eva, who I would say is a very good judge of character, where we consistently get this notion of don't trust him. I'm like, all right, I'm just not going to trust him or anything he has to tell me. I mean, I don't see the harm in this right now. Oh, yeah, I gotta say, Wicked brings up a pretty good one on my several
Oh,
layered joke of it all. But he
God.
went to the tomb of Nezarec. He can't be a liar. Yeah, sure.
Well, okay, so the Drifter's Gambit book specifically is written with that bias. Can we trust everything that the renegade says himself? We're talking about not trusting Drifter, but because it's all biased in the text itself, because it's only from one perspective, only from a very opinionated gentleman or female or thing, can we even say 100% that we can trust what they've written because of the bias?
I mean, that's the thing, right? So we don't know who this character is. We
Correct.
don't like is
We can assume, but that's
right.
not
We
giving
have
us
some
any.
guesses,
Oh, I've
right?
got some assumptions. Let me tell you.
We we have some guesses. Some might
Mm-hmm.
even be educated guesses,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we don't know. And so, like, here we get into things like, all right, all of these are tagged with like a renegade's observations of a drifter,
Mm-hmm.
right? So is he observing? Is the renegade observing these in their diary, in a, a recorded log that they're sending back to the Vanguard? You know, like you
What
talk
is
about things differently depending on your audience, right? I write about an event in my personal journal using different words and different vocabulary, different phrasing than I would if I was going to tell my best friend about it.
That's an
You
interesting
know,
perspective I've
different
never even
than
thought
I'm
of that.
going to tell my boss about what happened. You know, the same event that happened to me.
Right.
You know, so this is another thing, like regardless, if setting aside the moment for the moment about whether the renegade can be trusted to tell the truth, like maybe the renegade did see all these things happen, right? But you're going to write about it differently if you're just writing for your own sake than if you're making a report to somebody.
You can't even
You're going to,
assume what kind of
yeah, like,
what he's writing it on this one either. Like
right. We don't know. Like, it's in quotes. It sure sounds like the renegade is talking to somebody, but it could be a log. You know, maybe they don't have paper journals in the future. Maybe they have, you know, starship captain logs.
that would be interesting.
I think
So maybe it's a auditory version of a journal.
well,
You
and I
know,
think
maybe
too,
it's not.
another example that I immediately thought of Purple when you were talking about that is, I don't know if everyone has had a chance to see Solo yet, but there's a scene where Lando or Donald Glover, who plays Lando, is in the Millennium Falcon, and he's writing or he's recording a drama, but it's like a dramatic retelling of quote adventures that he had. That's also kind of like, you know, with the Ancient Apocalypse armor, where we have the recordings from the Drifter for Posterity, part 1 of 5, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is recording that with the intent, like the intent is there to be shared. You're not
Right.
writing, and I think that's and I'm sorry if I'm repeating that, but I think that's what you were saying, right? It's that the intent of the created content is just as important, if not more so, than what is being created, because it tells us how
Exactly.
it determines the flavor in which something is made.
Yeah.
Would that be
And
an
then
accurate summary of what you were saying?
yes. And then the other thing, to put another layer on it, because we don't have enough layers, you know,
You're an onion.
is right. um, why is the renegade observing the drifter in the first place? So, like, there's a difference between the renegade is at the tower. The vanguard says, hey, there's this creepy guy doing weird things out in the universe. You should go find him and see what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then off he goes, right? And he's like, man, I gotta watch this creepy guy do weird things. Versus, like, here comes the renegade going about his business doing something else and happens to come across someone who's doing something that is interesting in that it brings it to his attention, right? Okay, now, like, this is a weird thing that I came across. Something happened to cause the renegade to pay attention. Maybe then later he gets, loops in the vanguard or, whatever else he's doing. But do you understand the difference that I'm saying?
The intent of...
Right, because if the renegade is sent out from the beginning saying this person is doing weird things, like maybe bad things, we don't know, and you need to observe them, then probably that person is going to view anything that person does as suspicious. Right?
He's being sent in the world with already an angle.
Exactly. As opposed to, like, here's the renegade going off doing his own thing, and then he's like, wow, that's a person doing weird stuff. That colors it a different way.
Going out with an agenda versus not, or like just their own bias against the person.
Right.
Makes sense. It makes me wonder... So it makes me wonder if the writer himself is technically biased against as a lifelong bias type thing, hinting at the possible identity of him being Shen Malfur, which is kind of a theory that a lot of people tend to have at this point. Not necessarily a true theory, but a theory.
Yeah. I mean, it's reasonable as any others. I won't say any others, but that's probably not true.
I mean, he's not...
I could come up with something that would make you doubt that.
He's not Zavala. So, I mean, or at least, God, I hope he's not Zavala. I'm already mad at that.
That would be really complicated.
That would be weird.
I have questions. Well, but I think also the other thing too that this is pointing at, and to hammer this home again, is that this points to the storytelling aspect that is that is Destiny. Because normally with a lot of stories, we're used to being told things from a narrator's point of view. We don't have that at all in Destiny. All of the information that we've gotten is from in-game. It's from the perspective of people in the world. And so the thing too to remember is like what Purple is saying about the renegade here is, what is that person's agenda? And I don't say this, I don't mean this nefariously. What is that person's agenda? Everyone has an agenda. Everyone has a angle from which they are not only seeing things, but also retelling those things. Witness bias is a huge contention point within, even reality as far as legal systems go. That is a legit concern. And that's the same thing that's happening here, is you have to understand the individual who's telling it almost, if not more so than the individual that they're telling you about. Another example from Destiny 1 is the Books of Sorrow. I mean, that was a massive information dump for sure, but it was also a giant piece of propaganda from the Hive, for the Hive. And so reading that, you had to take into account that, yeah, this is a lot of information, but did everything actually happen the way that we're being told here? There's some things that didn't necessarily line up with other things that we were seeing. And so that's not, I know a lot of people will jump on that as quote unquote bad writing, but actually I think that's actually a sign of
real life.
Well, I mean, there's that, but actually that's what I was going to go with. I think if you have that type of discrepancy, that actually might be a sign of really, really good writing, because that means that they are actively writing from the perspective of the one individual, not from the whole picture, not from a narrator's point of view. They're actively able to flip the bias from which they're viewing what is going on in the world. You have to understand so much in order to be able to do that particular feat. Like that's why a lot of fiction stories are not written from a first person perspective, because it's really freaking hard to write that way.
Yeah. If you've ever tried to plot out any kind of complicated narrative and then try to tell the story from only one character's perspective, and then you have to hold the whole story in your head, but remember what only this one character knows.
Yeah. You have to you have to make yourself ignorant of your own world. And it just, to me, like I've dabbled in like short stories and stuff, and like I've tried it, and I mean, even like I've managed to maybe do a little bit of it, but it takes a ton of like mental energy to keep that balance, because you, at the same time, you also don't want to share too much. Right?
I think the thing that helps combat that, like a skill or a way to practice it, is going into D&D and going into a session and where you have a DM talking to a specific character at the table who is the only one technically in the room. You can do it two ways. You can literally force everybody at the table to leave except for the one character who's getting talked to, or you can practice
out of character knowledge
and trying to contain what your character knows within a certain realm and not use the information until the person tells you.
Yeah, that's so hard.
It's hard. It is really hard to do, but it's a good way to practice if you're an aspiring writer who wants to write in that kind of genre. Playing D&D or role playing and only knowing the things that your character knows rather than knowing all the secrets of the realm. It's hard, but it's good to do.
So a tangent on that I just you're talking about that just made me realize this, but I honestly think that with role playing games, I'm really a big fan of this, but we role play whenever we do role playing games. We actually do it through like Roll20, which is an online app, and one of the sad things, actually, in hindsight, now that you're saying what you're saying, Green, is that OOC information is no longer a concern when you use an app like that, because you can just DM the individual character, right? So there is no need for people to compartmentalize information like that. And actually, I think that's kind of a sad thing, because people are missing out. That's a really actually important skill that role playing actually did teach, as far as like a useful real life skill. And I think that's interesting, because people who might not have ever played an actual tabletop role-playing game, like the original, like paper and pencil, like legit paper and pencil, would have no idea that existed. And that, I don't know, just from a psychological standpoint, I think that might color a little bit on where some of the confusion maybe on the bias for games like Destiny kind of maybe stem from it. I'd just be interested. Now my researcher brain is turned on, and I'm like interested in like different demographics of the degrees of not comprehension's the wrong word, but the degrees of speaking out against quote unquote retcon and anger against misperceived bad writing or whatever. I'd be curious how many people who are really outspoken against, poor writing in any game, really, honestly, have actually experienced what you just described, because I agree 110% with how you just described it. That is an extremely accurate example of what is going on within Destiny specifically, is that we are playing a tabletop game in which we do not have access to the OOC information at all. Like we have no scope of what's going on, and we're just rolling gather information checks, and we don't know who's lying and who's not.
Yeah, but there are characters in the game who do know, and they're not sharing. at all. Mara.
And that's kind of the
Speaking-
argument. That's actually the argument that's kind of going on in chat right now is like, you know,
Mhm.
that brings up the question, is that necessarily a good thing, right? Sometimes, and that's a valid point. Like some people play video games and play games to escape reality. They don't want that.
Right.
And that's a fair assessment.
But the thing is you want to be able to have the suspension of disbelief, right? That's the whole goal of the escapism, is being able to immerse yourself in such a way that you can believe what you're playing.
Right. It's a fine line for sure.
It is a fine line. And talk about our own biases. Pens and I joke about this all the time in chat, that he has a bias against Mara and the Awoken kind of the royalty at the moment. And I have a bias against Zavala and the Vanguard. Just, I acknowledge that. I know that it is stupid, but we kind of joke with each other a little bit about how ridiculous it is and how our own biases color our perceptions of everything that's happening with them. So what happened with last week and Mara getting pissy with the ghost, so many people online were just furious about it. And I'm like, no, I would be pissed too. Because, I mean, if I was a queen and I had some pipsqueak ghost telling me what I should be doing, I'd be pissed. I can see it from her perspective. But
I mean,
don't see it that
again,
way.
that's again a situation where you can see it from both perspectives, right? I mean,
that's a difference.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But I think that's a content. Like I can get myself in trouble really fast following that comment. But I was going to say, like, that is an excellent example of being shown the context, of seeing two sides of the same picture, because from Ghost's perspective, Mara is being very standoffish. She is not being involved. We don't, like, you know, from our perspective or from Ghost's perspective, she is being a quote unquote bad queen. Whereas from Mara's perspective, she's looking at it from a different angle, maybe a bigger picture. To be fair, we don't know, but she has just as much right to respond the way she did to Ghost, because Ghost, I mean, you know, it's that age old thing of like, I mean, yeah, she might be coming down hard on him, but remember, Ghost was the one that slighted her first. When it comes down to it, you know, that's kind of where her anger is striking a chord, I think. And I think that might be because the vast majority of our perspective is from Ghost's perspective. So we actually kind of naturally will align more from his frustrations, because it makes sense from us. But I mean, we don't know what is going on. There is a bigger picture moving, and you know, whether or not it's true that she is being standoffish, you know, we don't know. We don't know the context of that. So her frustration,
and also she could be being standoffish and also be justified in that.
Right. That's what I was about to say. It's like, you know, that makes me, and again, kind of pulling in, you know, another tangent is it makes me think of the Infinity War, right, with Doctor Strange, where he's like, I've seen 14 million and only one works, and then he's like, I'm sorry, and then everything kind of goes to hell in a handbasket. But it's like, the question is so are you still on the path to the one, or are you still, like, you know, there's things that are done that in the short term might look bad, but in a long game or a long-term gain actually end up being beneficial. And so the problem is that
lose the battle, win the war.
Yeah, you don't want a Pyrrhic victory, right? You don't want to lose. You don't want to win the battle to lose the war. You'd rather lose the battle and win the war.
Right.
So I mean, and that's where, you know, and I feel Beard might jump in on me on this one, but that's where the question of strategy-wise, you see the difference between Ghost and Mara. Ghost is more focused on the short-term gain, and Mara's more focused on, you know, the overall war. Is the kind of the dynamic that seems to be presented right there.
I don't know if Ghost is necessarily focused on the short-term gain, because he's he's focused on the awoken people, because right now the latest things that we've been seeing with the Corsairs is that a lot of them are very frustrated and angry and beaten down because of the continual cycle that happens.
Well,
And so we
yeah.
see that perspective of it. I don't know if it's necessarily a short-term goal of Ghost to.
Well, he's also in the trenches. Like
Right.
I think that's what he says, if I remember correctly. It's like, you're not here where your people are suffering. Like, sorry, yeah, I guess that would be a more accurate. Ghost is looking at it from inside the battle, whereas Mara might be more of the
general outside strategist.
Yeah, like the person who's playing chess as opposed to the person or the piece that's being played with. I guess, if that makes a weird amount of sense.
This week's comments from him actually mirror that sentiment entirely.
Oh, do they?
Of
Okay.
course, we don't know if he had a response for Mara from when she absolutely lip-lashed him.
I mean, regardless of how you feel, I mean, like, I think that both sides had really good points, and I think they both kind of had. I think they both got digs in that were valid. I really do. I enjoyed listening to Ghost's little tantrum, and I enjoyed having Mara come down and being like, "Stop it."
Yeah, no, I actually really liked that part. It showed a piece of her character that I was hoping to see at one point or another. But
yeah, it showed the
regalness.
Like, she has a spine, and it's not just, I know I'll probably get grief for this, but it's not just a pretty face. Like, she actually will back up the threats.
Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing that he had kind of mentioned was that, he worries about those that are out and are fighting each and every week, and if they will ever actually see the outcome of what it is that they're actually doing throughout this curse and this constant cycle that just keeps going on. So just to back up what you were talking about.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Was that when he dropped the one is it Amrita who bleeds out?
Yes, Amrita.
Was that
she's the first one. Yeah, she's week 1.
But I mean, wasn't this the argument when he kind of mentions that he has to watch this every single time?
Technically, does the Techian mention that is Amrita? We always assume that it's Amrita at the end, because she's the one who's injured. But I don't remember if the Techian is the one, like if that is the floating Corsair, the same one.
I swear there was a line about her bleeding out. I'll look real quick, but I will do that off record. Did you guys I know, Purple, you had also mentioned Zavala and Eva.
Oh, sure.
About how perspectives change.
Yes. So in the book Dawning Delights, the very first entry, which is called Lighter Days, is, well, one, it's a really great card if you haven't read it, or entry, or whatever you want to call them. And it basically is a summary of Eva Levante's perspective on Zavala. Right? Zavala is one of the first people she meets when she goes to the tower forever and ever ago. And she thinks that he's really like stern and angry, and like basically he has no sense of humor, right? And she gets nervous every time he walks by. And then like here he comes and he makes a joke. And like she's kind of shocked, like not expecting Zavala to be the kind of person to tell a joke. And then she's like, oh, now I've changed my perspective, and like he's a nice guy. Like, yeah, he's the leader of the Vanguard, and he has to be serious a lot of the time, but like he also has a personality, and a sense of humor, and they're kind of friends at the end. So it was just a really nice, succinct, 1-page summary of how your bias can change versus from one interaction with something.
Interestingly enough, I would say that all of the Dawning Delights worked to change our perspectives on all the characters that are in them.
Yes, I would agree with that for sure.
It makes me
There's just-
respect
That one was just the
Hawthorne's
most,
right arm
I think.
a bit more.
Hawthorne punching what's his face in the nose. Yeah, everybody
that was good.
as soon as that card dropped, everybody messaged me. I'm like, guys, I'm okay. I realize he's a jerk. It's fine.
I just love it. I was like, oh man. Oh, that made me happy.
But yeah, I just thought the Zavala one was the most blatant, obvious, I guess.
Well, she just outright states it, which is nice. What about the man who they called Cade? That book. Did you have trouble writing a summary for that one?
Well, there isn't a summary, so. But it's a different kind of issue, right? So I put that one next to a Drifter's Gambit, because the Drifter's Gambit is like outsider's bias, right? We're watching the renegade have all these observations about the Drifter, and we don't know what the renegade's perspective is on the Drifter, so we can't really draw a lot of conclusions about him.
Right.
But Cade is writing about himself.
Because Cade is great.
Right. But because of the nature of being an exo, he is also unsure about a lot of things about himself. So every life that he has, every number that he gets is biased. The next one is biased based on the notes the last one left, which is a whole different situation.
Oh man, talk about the layers. The layers of interpretation, interpreting your own. Oh gosh, that would have been kind of a pain in the butt to write.
You mean interpreting the things that Clovis Bray left him to read? Yeah.
And then, like, once you get into things like, okay, so how many times did he do this? Right? Obviously, he did it at least twice, right? Because he mentions having looked at the notes back before. But every time, every cycle that he leaves himself notes, he's interpreting more, because that's another layer of interpretation, and like in history, and I talked about primary sources and secondary sources in the Ishtar Collective episode I did about research bias. And so now it's like the first set of notes is a primary source on that life. And then the second set of notes is, okay, now he's gone through and he's read all of these notes, and now he's commenting on his interpretation of them. And then you get another layer of that, and then another layer of, how many layers did he get? 6 at the most, I guess.
Right. If they're counting that, if they're starting at 1 instead of
1, unless they, but we don't know that he did it every single time either.
Right.
We don't know. So, like, how convoluted does it get? How many interpretations? And did he erase the previous ones when he made the new ones?
Don't know.
Yeah, see, it gets
convoluted.
It gets complicated.
Oh yeah, for sure. Are there any other books that strike you that are just obvious? Like, what about Maracena? Is that, would you consider that having a lot of bias because of the perspective that it's written from? Or...
Yeah. I think that the Maracena is a lot like the Books of Sorrow, right? They are told to the reader. And so there is a kind of performance there. And then you
Mhm.
have to get into, like, okay, why are you telling me this? Right? This isn't someone's journal that we found. This is something that is being presented to you.
True. But what about the histories of things? Like, okay, when you're writing a historical paper or a review on an event, when
Mhm.
when you're relaying that, how do you prevent such bias within the paper itself? Because it's going to be written from a perspective. That's how history a lot of times is relayed.
Right. So when I'm writing a research paper, the first thing you do is there's a huge like preface or prologue where you talk about your perspective and why you're writing the paper, right? Why I'm
Mhm.
writing this book. And so that will give your audience a an understanding of your biases. That's the purpose of it. So whenever I come across a document that is made for public consumption that doesn't have that kind of prologue, then I immediately start thinking, okay, now I'm trying to guess what the person's motivations are for writing this. And how does that change the perspective and interpretations of their words?
Okay. Instead of just relaying what they said from their perspective as
Right.
wholesale.
Because if I'm telling a history, right, I can tell you the like I can tell you what happened during the Civil War, right? I can list all the battles that happened and I can
Right.
tell you all how many soldiers died and where the troops moved around, right? I can also tell you the story of this Union soldier, and I can tell you the story of this Confederate soldier, and I can tell you the story of this runaway slave, right? And I can tell you the story of this town. But the way that I study their information changes the way that I tell that story. Because if I'm a military historian, I'm the only significant parts that I'm going to tell you are the people that were important to the military strategy of that battle,
Right.
right? But if I'm a social historian, I'm going to talk about the this impact of that battle on the town, right? What happened to the people who lived in the town? What happened to the mill workers? You know, so that's a different story, and it's going to emphasize certain parts and de-emphasize other parts. But I don't know what got left out in the story of the Awoken because this because Mara didn't decided it wasn't important from her perspective, but maybe somebody else would have thought it was important.
Right. So, gosh, it's just going from the Morrison specifically because it seems like such a dictated history.
Yeah, well, it is, but so are the Books of Sorrow.
But they're
Technically,
dictated.
with the stuff that we also talked about last time with the
These books are lies.
yeah.
Right. Well, and so like that's the thing with the Books of Sorrow, right? They are also a dictated history of their people, but we know enough about them to make guesses about the motivations of the author on why they were written. Right? So like is it
Is
going to be different? I don't know Mara well enough to make this guess, But my first question would be, is the Marasena for the awoken people or for other people? Right?
Who's the
Because
intended audience?
you write your history differently. I talk about history differently if I'm talking to a person from like a local person or a foreigner, right? When I give a tour at the antebellum house, you know, the first thing I do when I walk in the door is I introduce myself and I ask them where you're from, because we get people from all over the world,
Right.
right? I'm going to tell that story differently to someone whose family has lived in the same town for 3 generations than I am to someone who's from China, right? Like,
Right.
it's the same story technically, right? But I tell it differently because other people, outsiders, need more context.
They don't need the nitty-gritty too. They need
Right.
the
And then you get into things like, if this is written, if the Marasena has been written to be propaganda for non-awoken people, right? Then it's like an ambassador. So then you have a layer of, okay, what does Mara want other people to think about the awoken, right? You want to, does she want them to think that the awoken are good people? She might kind of change her language to make it seem better. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because we don't have all the answers. But do you
Right.
understand what I'm saying? Like, you present yourself differently as an ambassador for your country, and that's what it is, if that's who her audience is, versus if you find something that's supposed to be internal, right? It's like an
Right.
internal memo for a company versus like a public memo. They use different language, even if they say ultimately the same thing.
Be such a difficult thing to write. To
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind as well as a personal writer.
Oh
Writing
gosh,
the
the
story.
storytellers are just brilliant.
Interesting. And I wonder, as far as like storytellers go, if they, when they're writing their stories, I know that some writers take leads on certain types of stories. We talk about John Goff and the Last Word Thorn story and the Your story quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder how many of them stay blind to certain aspects of the story to help write more authentically, or if they keep that in mind and are able to separate, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, right? Because most of the time when we talk about like writing a novel, like you might have 1 or 2 people helping you, but for the most part, novels are written by one person,
Right.
right? Like Jim Butcher, I'm sure has somewhere like a map in his house with colored string, right? Like, of
With the
all the
crazy
different
guy.
things that are happening.
Oh
But,
God. I can't even
but
imagine with that
oh
world.
god. So, but Bungie has a whole team, right? It's not just one person. And so, like, I don't know how they've divided up those things. Like, if it were me, I'd be like, okay, you're on the Awoken team and you're on the Hive team, and so that, like, here, create the Vex, histories and stuff. But they also interact with each other. So then, like, what do you have someone from the Hive team go and knock on the Awoken's door? Like, the Awoken teams come knock on the Hive door, like, hey, we're gonna try to blow up your ship. Like, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, totally. Oh goodness. It's just mind-boggling to try to think and go through all the aspects that as a writer you would have to go through, or interpreter of the writing you have to keep in mind, because keeping in mind the audience and stuff like that is not something I always think about. Like, who is this being written for? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the Drifter's Gambit one you can keep in mind for the most part, that the intent looks like it is journalistic type writing. I don't know if
Yeah,
journalistic is a word, but it
it
is in
is
my
now.
book now. Yay. But the intent on other things, you don't think about the audience. Like, I've never considered that the Maracena was written not for the awoken people, but for those of us who are unfamiliar with the awoken. And it's not just
Yeah,
a history book for their junior high kids essentially to go through if they have junior high kids, but
right.
it's something for us to interpret for them and maybe slight propaganda like the Books of Sorrow, which
Yeah.
granted every
Well, and
history propaganda, but whatever.
sure, but it's different. And Chat brought up a really good point too, that the means of acquisition changes, because we, I think, kind of fall into this trap, especially like with Ishtar, then everything is in these nice, neat little pages.
Mhm.
And you kind of forget that, like, with the Books of Sorrow, we had to go like find these weird things and bring them back to Eris, and she had to interpret them for us. Like, that's how we got those.
Yeah.
Right?
The
And so, like, um these pages of the Maracena came out of Bone Whispers, right?
Mhm. Well,
So
interpreted Bone Whispers by Eris.
right, right. So it's not like this is literally a book. Like, we call it a book,
Right.
and but like, it's not like we were just walking around the reef and we're like, hey, someone dropped this book. Right? Like,
There's no first person account necessarily. It's an
right.
interpreted.
And then it's like, okay, who interpreted them, and like, why why did the bones have the story in the first place, right? Was that the original intention
Mhm.
for them to be discovered? Like, did Mara write them and then put them in the bones because space magic, and then that's what we're supposed to do? Or like, did she write a book and then the bone, like the creature ate the book and
And
then,
absorbed
like,
it.
absorbed the knowledge? Like, I don't know.
Interesting. So many little perspectives. Or just the whole, I mean, yes, it's a video game and it has reasons for all the different things. Sometimes it's just like, also, is it just game mechanics as a way to deliver the lore to us?
Well, sure. Yeah, of course.
To
At some point, we will hit a point where it's like, because video games,
Oh yeah,
right?
always.
Um, but I feel like for the most part, I really I have hit the because video games point very few times in Destiny. Like, in comparison to what I would have expected,
Mhm.
right? They really do a very good job of trying to give a lore explanation for most things. Obviously we can get into like um balancing weapons and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that stuff. But like,
Why is there a
they
nuclear weapon with a black armory in the middle of the city by the crater that we have to destroy because reasons? Yeah. I'm
right.
still trying to figure that one out lore-wise
Well,
myself.
maybe we'll find out later.
God, I hope so, because right now that raid is real confusing to me.
Yeah.
Riven, I understand. Like, the lore reasons behind Riven make sense to me. The lore reasons behind the Scourge of the Past, no clue at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and like, even if you look back, like, I think this is one of the things that gets so interesting when you get into these games like Destiny that have expansions, and where the company that's making them really interacts with the community.
Mhm.
Because I think it's my guess that Bungie has realized along the way how much more excited the community is getting about the story than they originally anticipated.
Mhm.
because I mean, you can look at like the card for Warlock from Destiny 1,
Yes.
which is like, I mean, it's like three sentences. It says, Warrior scholars of light, warlocks devote themselves to understanding the traveler and its power. A warlock's mind is an arsenal of deadly secrets, balanced between godhood and madness. On the battlefield, those secrets can shatter reality itself. Like, that's pretty cool. That sounds really awesome. Like, I want to do that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but like, if you look at the entry for Dawnblade, it's like a little tiny narrative.
Yeah. I
And it's like,
remember the whole, like, when we got our first new subclasses with the Stormcaller and everything back in, what was it? It wasn't even Rise of Iron. Was it Taken King when we got
Taken
those
King.
subclasses?
Yep. Taken
yeah.
With Night Stalker and everything, the stories involved with all of them.
The Stormcaller had one of the best in-game story explanations. Like and all of them did. Tevis had a great one. That was also where we got introduced to the was it Ouroboros?
The Sunbreakers.
And the Stormcaller was really a explanation of our guardians as powers surpassing even the vanguards in some degree. It was like we didn't really get introduced to necessarily a new character with the Stormcaller, but we got introduced to a new aspect of the impact of what our actions had done to the world, as far as like Ikora's response to our training, which was really, really cool. Not to mention we actually got to see like the meditation and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Oh, goodness. This topic is like a never-ending topic in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good. Blue, what do you think? Is there something else we need to hit on? I'm trying to look through our little script thing. Did you want to go through the Dawnblade card, Purple?
No, I was just bringing it up as a comparison because I think that I just think it's really interesting and delightful how much Bungie has reacted to the community. Because it's not always something that you get to witness. Like when you are reading a book series, they're just sits in their house or in their office or whatever writing, and like, do they read what people think and what the theories are about what's going to happen in the next book? I don't know. They don't ever talk about it if they do, you know. Whereas Bungie like interacts with us as a community, and the writers interact with us and they answer our questions sometimes, and sometimes they don't. But then we get really great little Easter eggs like Kinderguardians is now canon. That's because of us, right?
Yeah.
Bungie didn't come up with that. Like, that's a thing that we got to contribute to the game that we love, which is just really cool. And like, will we influence the story? Probably not the overarching story. I don't know. But it's just nice to know that they are listening to us, and it makes me feel like they are trying to make the game better for us and what we want. Whether or not they always succeed is a different issue.
True. Cool. Blue, do we want to kind of figure out a wrap up for this, or how do we want to?
I think that's fair. I mean, I definitely, I realize I have a growingly unique perspective on Destiny from like a mechanic standpoint, because, I've said this a couple times. I actually rely on Green and Beard a lot to tell me what's going on in game, because I to be blunt, don't have time to play the game as much. And also, I have lost a lot of interest due to mechanics, not because of the story. I'm actually still endlessly fascinated. If you were here for the live stream, you probably missed, or you probably know that, given the geek out that we had slightly before we started recording about the upcoming information. So like my perspective is like reading the content and hearing about the experiences from people. I think it gives me a really kind of interesting third person not out of body, but like outside perspective, but it's an internal perspective because of the familiarity that, with this group, you have to be familiar with the underlying lore and underlying paradigm within the Destiny universe as a whole. And it's just, to me, it's a really interesting because the biases in game are really pretty clear. I don't know if that makes sense, but like reading content, it's very easy to analyze said content much less emotionally, much more logically. It's just easier because I'm not hyped up on adrenaline, because I just got done with a raid when I got the information. I don't have that emotional connection that I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just a different perspective, right? And that's kind of the point of this entire conversation. And I know Beard and I've had a lot of conversations about kind of not necessarily that particular topic, but about like bias and about perspective and opinions. We all three of us, actually Purple, even all of us really, have bounced the conversation about biases both in game and out of game around quite a bit. And I think that what that is all to say is that, even if you don't find something supremely interesting from a particular angle, doesn't mean that you can't get interested in it from a different angle, right? That's the beauty of being able to shift bias or shift perspectives, which is kind of also important when you're doing research. And I know Purple, you have, I constantly refer to your podcast about bias in research because I think it does an excellent job in summarizing what anyone who went through extensive research classes would recognize, right? That when I listened to that episode, I immediately understood what was being said, but I also think that it does a really good job in presenting that information to people who might not have the academic context that I did to understand it. So like, I think it makes it accessible to everyone, which I think is amazing. You and Kex, basically.
Well, thank you. That was really my intention.
Right. No, and I mean it does. It really does. And I constantly am referencing that episode when I talk to people who are curious about like how to, like, why that's important. That's a constant reference point that I give, as well as, Kex's chart for validity.
Confirmation chart.
The Kex confirmation. I
Yes.
think that those two, if you're still listening and you're interested in kind of diving into more of like the research side of it, which is definitely where I kind of am starting to fall, that's definitely a good starting point if you're not familiar with that kind of concept, because it gives you, if nothing else, it gives you tools to which you can keep a cheat sheet, I guess, if you will, on your table or on your desk or wherever you're doing, to kind of give you an idea of like, okay, so, on referencing the Kex diagram, here, I'll flip it real quick. I literally have it sitting right next to me. Kex kind of uses the concept of bias and the concept of perception, but he approaches it more from his actual job, which is law enforcement. And so they have to take into account validity of not just the information, but also the person giving the information. So the source of the intel, as well as what's actually being given. So it's got a dynamic grid in which you can kind of plot out, how useful is this information and how authentic is this information. and you want to, that helps you, because then if you're ever in a conversation, or if you're ever, if someone's writing a script for, content to be created, or someone wants to do, role playing, or, whatever, it kind of gives you an idea of like where in the scope of possibilities and reality as defined by this particular game world it can be. And that to me it's a skill that definitely anyone can pick up. It might be a weird way of looking at things, but it is teachable. And just like what we started off with, biases are learned, and so that's both a positive and a negative thing, right? It's like you can teach yourself, you can correct, like, negative biases can be corrected. Positive biases can also be corrupted. So, it's a two-way street there. But I think as far as research goes, the biggest thing, again, to kind of circle back and make this a full circle is not the removal of the bias, but rather the recognition and acknowledgement of the bias. Now, you can try to reduce the bias, but you have to also understand that the bias is always going to be there. Cade's, lore entry, the man they call Cade recognizes that he is a storyteller. And from the very beginning, he calls it out. He says, I'm a storyteller, and this is, I defer things. I deflect with humor and blah, blah. And then he catches himself and then kind of realigns himself. And that's exactly what is a good way of looking at that, is constantly keeping an eye on where you're going and kind of keeping an eye on, okay, what's going on here? Why are we doing that? That's a good habit to build, just not even just in game, but in life in general. And I think that's why, for me, these type of conversations, I've been really quiet just because I've just enjoyed listening to it, because this is the type of stuff that is it's not just accessible, outside of game, but it's also important, right? This touches on a lot of really, really good life skills, ultimately, I think. But and I can go on for hours about the psychological cognitive bias and stuff, and like the different types of like hermeneutic phenomenology and how that can affect different things. There's a very deep well, if you open it, you can get sucked in pretty quickly. And it's not, and I'll be honest, as a person who kind of sometimes will live there, it's not always a bad thing. It makes you aware of things that I think ultimately makes everyone better off. I think that's really my end, is that, bias is not necessarily negative. Just the same way as retcon is not necessarily a negative thing. Like there is a use for these. These are tools, and they should be used. They shouldn't be ignored. They shouldn't be thrown away, but they also shouldn't be abused. And I think that's where the challenge for me, in just like reality, I think is.
It's like I don't know how to follow that. I'm sorry.
Well, and I know that probably got like a little, I don't know, meta or whatever, but that's for me when we talk about, like, when I talk to Purple or Baxter or Bife or any of the other creator, Beard, Green, any of these guys, like when I talk to them and we talk about, yes, we talk about what's going on in game, but more importantly, we talk about like how it all fits. It's a giant puzzle. And for me, as a person who really, really enjoys putting puzzles together, that's where I get my excitement. That's where my excitement comes from. My excitement doesn't come from, oh my God, roll. I don't even know what gun is. I don't know. Like, I don't care. I don't care. I could get
well,
it.
I'm the same. Like,
so
I don't care.
For me, yeah, go for it.
Well, I was just to say, like, it's kind of a running joke now. Every time I come in here, you're like, let's talk about video games. Like, I don't play video games.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, I'm getting to the same point. So you and I will soon be on the same page there.
And yeah. And so like, I don't play them. This is the first first-person shooter I've ever played in my life. And my husband played it for a while before he convinced me to start playing it. And the way he convinced me was by telling me the story of The Last Word in Thorn.
Mm-hmm.
Because I sat on the couch and I watched him shoot things, and I was like, yep, you're shooting aliens. That's the thing that you're doing.
That sounds like what Julie says to me. Goodness.
Right. But then I was like, oh, that looks like a cool gun. Like, what's that gun? He's like, oh, it's The Last Word. Here, let me tell you about it. And all of a sudden, now here I am, right? Because that's more interesting to me.
Yeah. I've stayed with this game longer because of the story than I have any other game.
It's almost like stories are important, you guys.
It's almost like D1's like not having a story was a totally lot. What? Ah, goodness. Blue.
Yes.
Should we move on to shoutouts?
I believe that would be an excellent plot to course.
Who do you want to go first, Captain?
Stardate. Purple. Why don't you lead us?
Sure. I will give shoutouts to Baxter, who is super awesome, and the whole rest of the Ishtar team, who's growing slowly but steadily, because we are growing slowly but steadily as a Destiny community. And I love all of you guys.
Yay. Baxter and Jazzy and all the
and Unisys and Aaron and
so many people who are transcribing all these things that make it
Red
so
Renegade and all of my transcribers. I can't even list you all because there are so many of you. Bless each and every one of you for recording all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It makes it so much easier. So much easier. Blue or Beard or Blue?
Sorry. Sorry, weather is getting interesting actually at the moment. I just really want to take a quick second and thank everyone who's, listening. I think that is just kind of similar to what Purple was saying about the team growing there. The community with Focus Fire, I think, is really, you guys give us reason to keep exploring the biases and the perceptions that are in Destiny, right? And I think that can't be said enough. So I really appreciate that, and I just wanted to give a big shout out there. I do also want to give a heads up that I'm hoping to have a sort of big announcement next week, I think, depending on how much sleep I can avoid and get stuff done. I'm hoping to have some stuff that I can put out hopefully here shortly. But yeah, that's all I got right now. I know that's kind of a teaser, but that's entirely what I wanted to go with.
That's such a teaser.
Enjoy
Beard?
I'll keep on my vague train, why not? Just general thoughts from my week, I suppose you could say, more than shout-outs over anything else. If you have something you need to tell somebody, make sure you do so. They may not be there tomorrow. If you are worried about anything that might be going on in your life, just kind of count your blessings otherwise. I know that is easier said than done in some cases. Aside from that, just, if you need to talk with anybody, Lord knows I'm always here for it. I know this community is here for it. I know this community in general is pretty open for it. So, don't be afraid to reach out if you feel that there's something that needs to be there, but know that we are all busy people and we will get to you as best as we can. Yeah, just if you gotta tell somebody you love them, just make sure you do. That's all I got.
Yeah. My shout outs are going to be a little less vague. My shout outs are to the various community members who have reached out multiple times this last week for me, just helping me out with my personal stuff too. Because I mean, we're all human. We all have our own personal stuff. Second shout out goes to Purple herself to just thank you for coming on and sharing your life skills, because you literally do this for a job, whereas we just do this for a hobby. And I know I always learn something new each time you come on, which is pretty stinking awesome. So thank you for jumping in with us again.
Aw, thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
It's always fun to come on with you guys.
For sure, even if it is super late for you.
Yeah, it's definitely after 2:00 in the morning. But that's why we have coffee.
Yes.
Me every week.
We love you, Beard.
I know, Beard.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week, and we'll probably stay for a bit of an after show. Cut.
All right. It's weird not having the audio there because I'm
I
so
know.
used to hearing it. But it's also nice. Blue, why are you looking up T's on Giphy?
Because I was like tease. Like I was gonna put I don't know where I was going with it. All I know is Giphy's search engine sucks.
Yeah, it does. That's really funny. So, yeah. Talk
What
about practicing
plot pun.
Plot pun?
Yeah, that was when Green asked if we should do shout outs, and Blue was like, yes, we should plot that out, something.
Oh.
We were talking about.
I didn't even, yeah. Oh,
Plot a course. Plot that course.
Was that
Yeah.
Was that the data mine teaser that they had, that Beard that you posted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you believe you're the only ones with the power to see what cannot be seen or what should not be seen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's what Z and Seth were talking about the other day on Twitter.
Ah, okay. I didn't realize that. I did not put those two pieces together.
I don't know. So, yeah. Chat, thanks for hanging out. Black Flag, Dino, Wicked.
Yes.
And I think Penn's probably already jumped off. I know Jamie went to bed already.
Yes, I'm about to go join him.
You should go do that. Go get some sleep, hon.
Yes. Bye, y'all.
Night.
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 Oh my god, Twitter is so annoying.
Yeah, I know. But once it's set up, it's fine.
Yeah, I know. I forget how like aggravating setting stuff up is. Like the formatters and stuff. Like the fact that you can't have spaces. Seriously, what the fuck? Like what?
Yep. But it's fun to write. It's fun to write for that kind of thing because you can do short form and do interactives, which is what I primarily do, or you can do long form, which is what the Marasov account that I sent you does mostly.
I'll have to take a look at it.
She does really interesting, humanizing stories in long form, which is kind of cool. But yeah, there are better accounts than others, and then there's also stupid accounts.
What?
Where people are. Some people just want to be lewd. Some people are just weird. But there is a Zivu Arath account that started today that made me pretty happy to see. I was like, yes. And a Zavathun account. The Zavathun is more snark than anything, but she's fun to follow. I don't interact with her too much, though.
But why would Nezarak and Savathun be two separate accounts?
Nezarak is no longer an account, I can tell you that. That account got flipped into a different account.
Oh.
So that one's gone for now. Might come back, but it's flipped. I know the writer for that one, so. And let me just say, half of the fun of the person who wrote for that was poking at you, Beard, because you got so verklempt every fucking time that it popped up.
Want to
Wait.
trigger the grizzly bear? Just
Wait, you mean
Nezarak.
someone was taking enjoyment out of poking the bear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And it wasn't me. I will say that I was not the writer for Nez. I write a few different ones, but Nez is not one of them. I don't do evil characters.
Who knows if Nez is even evil?
Yeah,
Who
that's
knows
true.
if Savathun is even actually evil? These
That's
books are full of lies, after all.
Beard. I'm sorry things have been kind of shitty for you this week.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. But if you want a list of others, Blue, I'll get you a list of people I trust to RP with who are not going to push you into any direction you don't want to. And then I will also give you a list of people who not to talk to if you want. But I figure you can figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll just.
There are quite a few original character ones too.
Do.
Hmm.
Nope, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Maybe. Oh.
Yep.
Boom, 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 boom.
Beard,
Mm-hmm.
you gonna be okay, hun?
I'll be fine.
I give you air hugs from 3 hours time zone ways away or 2 hours time zone away.
Yep. I'll get them in 2 hours. Since
Yeah.
unfortunately, hugs probably travel at the speed of
Smell?
a hug.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay. I'm gonna hop off and go pass out too. Even though it's only midnight here.
I'm pretty well right behind you here. We gotta figure what's gonna happen with the snow tomorrow, because they're still saying it's gonna be. I think they upped the projections at this point now. We're gonna be getting more, and I don't know if it's gonna be starting like 1 o'clock or 12. I heard about 1 p.m. Then I close tomorrow, which probably means I'll be calling out. So we'll see.
Does that mean, like, are you gonna be okay, like, getting to and from work? Are they pretty good with the roads and stuff?
Well, it all depends on how bad it is by the time I have to leave. If it's cleared, then I'll probably go. But if it's pretty well
packed in,
if it's covered, I'm not bothering.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Take a rest. Take a break.
Yeah, kind of what today was, and that turned into not being the case whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. All right, I'm gonna stop bringing the party down. You guys
You're
have a good
okay.
night.
Night,
Beard.
everyone.
Night.
Night stream.
Night, guys. I don't know who's left. I see Wicked. Nighto.